As soon as we get a green light, we'll start. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday, December 18, 2018 meeting of the Edina City Council. Roll call, please. Ms. Allison.
Member Fisher.
Here.
Member Staunton.
Here.
Member Brindle. Here. Member Stewart.
Here.
Mayor Hovland.
Here. We have in front of us this evening a form of meeting agenda that's proposed. Manager Neal, any changes to the meeting agenda, or anyone else wish to modify the meeting agenda?
No, Your Honor, no change.
All right. Is there a motion to adopt the meeting agenda as shown?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion second to adopt the meeting agenda as shown. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We're going to go into community comment, but we have, I think, some students from Mr. Stathem's government class here. If you all want to stand up, just so we can recognize you. We'll have the camera pan back, and then your teacher will know you were here. So if those in Mr. Stathem's government class want to just stand up quickly for us, so we can recognize you.
And
too.
Other government classes.
Or any other government class. Any other students that are here.
And, yeah.
There, all right, here we go. There you go.
And Scouts, are you working on citizenship in the community? Well done.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Welcome as well. All right, we're going to move into community comment. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address the council on a matter of concern to them that's not otherwise on the agenda this evening, or is a matter set for a future public hearing? Please feel free to come forward. Yes, miss.
Hello, my name is Maddie Fernandez, and I live at 6905 West Shore Drive in Edina, Minnesota. I'm a junior commissioner on the Energy and Environment Commission, and I'm currently working with other young people of Minnesota on drafting necessary climate legislation at the state level. Noting the immediacy of climate change's impacts, as stated in the National Climate Assessment and the UN's IPCC report, we urge the city to follow in the state's footsteps and continue to support climate-friendly, necessary, progressive legislation in the coming years. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Maddie. Anyone else wish to address the council on a matter of concern to them?
My name is Frank Lorenz, 7151 York Avenue South. At the last city council meeting, there was an item from the fire department recommending a purchase of, I believe, 5 new fire engines, and the mayor pulled that down, which means essentially progressed it or tabled it. I don't see it on the agenda tonight.
I think it was pulled down 2 meetings ago and approved and approved last time.
Okay, so
it did get pulled a month ago.
Okay, very good. So we are going to buy 5 new fire engines for something over $3 million. Normally, the replacement cycle for engines of that type is about 20 years, but apparently the fire chief decided that he could save some unknown amount of maintenance money by shortening the cycle and repurchasing them every 10 years. The end paper for that is the bug spot on the windshield philosophy for equipment replacement, where you buy a new item rather than cleaning the windshield. But the question is, do we really need to spend the $3 million plus the interest on the bonds to have fire engines that generally have not worn out? Fire engines, unless they're struck in an accident on the highway that they're attending, normally don't wear out, but eventually the cost of replacement parts becomes great enough so that it makes sense to replace them. But people that live in Edina and have to pay the taxes that the people in front of me seem to be able to raise almost at will should be a little bit concerned that the fire chief decided he wanted some new engines. The city council approved it. cutting the replacement cycle time in half. Normally in a business situation run by responsible adults, you do something like an ROI calculation, and if the amount of money that it's forecast to save on maintenance can't be recovered in a specified period of time, let's say the next 8 years, 10 years, you don't make that decision. I mean, the Hennepin County bought an array of solar panels 5 years ago, and the return on investment was 200 years. They got called on it, but they did it anyway because they're just spending other people's money. I would not like to see the city of Edina go down the path of Hennepin County.
Thank you, Mr. Lorenz. I saw somebody else. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Nora Davis, and I live at 6921 Southdale Road in Edina. And I would like the City Council to consider instituting a sunshine index. With all the development we've had, we now have areas of town that are dark tunnels, or tunnels of darkness, as I like to explain them. I don't know if you've been down 66th, and you have seen the huge shadows that both the Aria and the hotel cast on 66th. It is dark. And as we begin to look at engaging people and having them out on the street, for them to be walking down that tunnel of darkness isn't very welcoming, unless, of course, we start providing everyone with minor helmets with lights on them. But it is something to consider. It really took me aback. We had gone for a month without sunshine, and then we had sunshine, and then you hit the darkness. And as I went past the new, or the coming new 7200, 7250, the south side of Sunrise was literally bathed in sunlight. And I just wonder what's going to happen to that when that complex goes up. So I think that's something that we need to start considering as development continues. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. All right. Anybody else wish to come forward and address the council on a matter of concern to them? Okay, we're going to move out of the community comment portion of the agenda. I'm going to move to the city manager's response to at least past community comments and concerns, and potentially addressing also the fire truck issue this evening, although you may want to defer that until the next meeting as well.
Thank you, Your Honor. I will defer the fire truck issue to next time so that we have some time to prepare a response, because there is a good response to that one. But in terms of responding to last council meeting's community comments, we had two. One was from Margaret Jose, who had some concerns about stormwater drainage in her neighborhood. She invited council members to come see it, and she had also talked about how the mayor had seen it and how she had interacted with city staff in her neighborhood. Also had comments from Mr. Lorenz about the library and some questions about what is happening with the redevelopment of the Southdale Library, and that really is a good question, a good subject. For those who aren't aware, Hennepin County Library runs the Southdale Regional Library on York Avenue and has for, I think, the last 7 or 8 years. And they have decided about 5 years ago they were going to discontinue the trio of operations that they have at that center. One of those operations was a service center, primarily for DMV-related services, and they moved that service center into the Southdale Center Mall. They are moving the courts, the Southdale courts, into the Ridgedale Court system, and that is going to be effective in February of 2019. That leaves only the library in that building. And a lot of our discussions with Hennepin County has been, what will they do with that site when there's just a library there? Because they will not just leave the building there as is with just a library in it. The plan had been to redevelop the site, to redevelop the building, to take the building down and to redevelop the site. And a library could have been kind of the anchor of that site, and there would have been other developments surrounding it. we entered into a development agreement, or I would say a development partnership agreement with Hennepin County, where we did some of the public engagement locally around the potential development proposals for that area, not proposals, but ideas, and doing some public engagement around it, trying to get some sense of what folks in town wanted to see there. And we started that process. We had a couple of meetings, we took some public input, and then that process stopped. And it stopped because Hennepin County asked us to stop. They were beginning to look at some architectural schemes. They were beginning to have some interest in the potential of having the library be perhaps somewhere else other than that 8-acre site on York Avenue. So that process of redeveloping, looking only at that site as a redevelopment for the library, stopped temporarily. So they have continued to look at sites for the library. We have ceased doing public engagement around that process for the moment. We do know that Hennepin County has $50 million in their capital improvement plan dedicated for the redevelopment of the library to replace the current Southdale Regional Library system. We do know that they are going to replace that regional library in that general part of the town. We do know that they intend to make their decision about what they're going to do by Q4 of 2019. And we do know that they want to complete that project by, whatever the project is, by 2023. So that's what we know today. We know they're looking at other options, but at this point, they are looking at those options on their own and through their own staff at this point.
Good. Thank you. And then next meeting, you'll come back and discuss the fire truck purchase issue, and
Yes.
Maybe you want to bring the chief with you as well. I can
Mr. Mayor.
tell Mr. Lorenz and others that I asked to have the matter pulled about a month ago because of the significant potential expenditure involved. Met with the fire chief, met with Manager Neal, went through all of the numbers, went through the costing analysis, went through the replacement analysis. And the reason I did that was because years ago when I was on the council, we had to replace some fire trucks. And what they did was I think they rebuilt the chassis on one or two of them. And that was the way they used to do it. But some of these trucks, I think, were at the 20-year mark, if memory serves me right. And so it was determined that, and this is my general recollection, is that they figured out that it would be better to put them on the same cycle with the same type of equipment so that our firefighters would be familiar with every truck, regardless of which truck they were in. It would be more efficient, more effective at the scene itself. And I left convinced that this was good, thorough analysis on the part of our staff, but we can explain it in more detail a couple weeks from now. Member Stewart.
I have a different topic I wanted to comment on. So during community comment, Maddie Fernandes talked about how, among other things, she mentioned that she is a student commissioner on one of our city commissions, our Energy and Environment Commission. Since there are a lot of young people in the audience tonight, I just want to point out that is something all of you are eligible to do. For anybody who is a rising senior, junior, or sophomore in high school, we welcome your applications to join our city commissions. We're always looking for talented people to contribute to those commissions. We do the applications starting in April and May, and then the interviews for those positions take place at the end of May and beginning of June. So think about joining one of our city commissions if you have an interest in what the city government does. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Anyone else on the consent portion of the agenda? Okay, we'll move on. We will move on to the consent portion of the agenda. That was the community comment portion. We have a consent agenda in front of us this evening. Is there anyone on the council that wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? If not, I will entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda as shown.
So second.
We got a motion and second to adopt the items on the consent agenda as shown. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. All right, and then our next section of the agenda is special recognitions and presentations. We don't have any this evening, other than I'm just going to quickly recognize that, and we're going to fetch him a little bit later as well here at the council, but we have Councilmember Stewart, who will be finishing his term of service with the council. This is his last meeting, and I think while we have a good crowd here, I just want to encourage all of you to join the council in thanking him for the 4 years of really good service. And we've got a big plaque for him. We're going to give him this plaque again. We gave it to him once when his family was here and had a little gathering beforehand. Some of you may have seen that coming in. But we'll do that again and send that home with him and send him home with our best wishes, too, for a job extraordinarily well done. All right, we're on to public hearings. And we have 3 public hearing matters tonight. And if you're out in the audience or at home, you see that the first one is a request for the passage of a resolution that involves the potential issuance of revenue bonds by the city of Malacca on behalf of something called A&E Care Properties, LLC. And you might be wondering, what the heck does that have to do with Edina? Well, you're going to find out from our Finance Director, Don Urim, here momentarily. Director Urim, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. As you had indicated, the request before the City Council tonight is to grant host approval for the City of Malacca to issue up to $7 million in bonds for A&E Care Services to relocate their corporate headquarters to the City of Edina. The location that is going to be purchased is 7171 Ohms Lane, which has been a vacant property for at least 3 years. Tonight, I have Kathy Youngstead, who is the CFO of the company, as well as Mark Beasley from Northland Securities, kind of doing the bonding transaction, here tonight to answer questions about the proposed project. I would like to say, though, this is the 3rd time we've done this year, and again, the issuance of debt by another city will have no impact on the City of Edina's credit rating. It does not create any liability for us, nor does it impact our ability to issue debt in the future. So with that, I'd just like to ask Kathy to come up here and explain a little bit about the company and the relocation of their corporate headquarters to Edina.
Before Ms. Youngstead comes up, Director Urim, why don't you explain why it's important for us to consider this in light of what you just said?
Mayor, members of the City Council, a couple of things. One is state law gives cities the ability to issue debt for projects in other cities. So that's kind of the statutory requirement. From our perspective, the job creation for the City of Edina is truly a benefit for us. And again, because it doesn't impact our ability to issue debt or create any liability, it's a beneficial thing to do.
But as the host city, we are also required to approve it if it's going to happen.
That's correct.
Right. Thanks, Member Stewart. All right. Ms. Youngstead, welcome. And would you give us your full name and business address, please?
I will. It's Kathy Youngquist, actually.
Oh, Youngquist, excuse me.
That's fine. And then the business address is 7485 Office Ridge Circle in Eden Prairie. And we are actually merging 2 companies together that are both nonprofits. So A&E stands for Augustana Care and Elam Care. We're both in the business of serving senior adults with health care. And we're in a merger situation, and we're moving both home offices into one office. And we don't have enough space in Eden Prairie at the Elam office, and Augustana doesn't have enough space in Minneapolis at the Minneapolis office. So we looked for space that was kind of in between the 2 and found the space in Edina that works quite well for us. And we also wanted to follow Don Urim over here because he used to be in Eden Prairie.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you almost used to be in Eden Prairie. You're coming here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He worked there in Eden Prairie when a while back when we were doing some other issues there. So we heard he was in Edina, so we wanted to come here.
All right. Well, that's good.
But we will have about 130 employees at that office. And as Don said, the building has been empty for a few years.
Is that the one right on the corner of Ohms Lane and just off Metro Boulevard?
Yeah, it's 71st and Ohms.
71 and 71,
Yeah.
I see the address. Okay.
Right.
All right, Ms. Youngquist, sorry to misstate your name
Oh,
there.
that's okay.
With you moving to Edina, we're not going to forget this. We're not, I'll
right,
promise not to
good,
forget your name
good.
again. All right, and then Mr. Beasley, anything you want to add? Springstead?
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, my name is Mark Beasy with Northland Securities, and actually lived in the city since '91 at 4410 Curve Avenue, and I've worked with Elam and Augustana for almost 25 years, and I'm proud to welcome them to the city of Edina where I live. And the bonds are going to be issued by Malacca because they have facilities up there, and we didn't want to interfere with any of your bonding plans next year. And all you have to do is give your host approval to allow it to be tax exempt. So,
All right, good. Thanks, Mr. Beasley.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming up.
you bet.
And nice to know you live in Edina as well. It's an extra comfort factor for us. All right, this is a public hearing matter. I'm going to open this up for public testimony. Is there anyone who wishes to come forward and testify regarding this matter? Seeing no one coming forward, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Got a motion second to close the public hearing. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. There is a motion embodied in a resolution 2018-135, which would approve the issuance of bonds by the City of Malacca on behalf of A&E Care Properties, LLC, under Minnesota Statutes Section 469.152 to 469.165. It's a voice vote, simple majority. Is there a motion to adopt that resolution?
So moved.
Is there a second? We got a motion second to adopt the resolution authorizing the issuance of the bonds. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Good. Great. Well, soon we'll be here. Yeah. There's some real satisfaction in knowing you're moving from Eden Prairie to Edina. Yeah, it's a real visceral thing. I just can't even explain it. Thanks. Thanks, Ms. Youngquist. And we look forward to those, to your business being here. It's a great location right by the trail, and there's so many things going on in that neighborhood that it'll be wonderful to have you here. Good, Mr. Beasley, thank you.
Thank you. Close to Braemar.
Yeah, there you go. All right, our second public hearing matter this evening is deals with the Greater Southdale District Plan that many folks in our community have been working on so hard for the past several years, and we're going to have a presentation tonight. I'm going to have Director Teague lead the matter off, and then I think he's going to introduce some of the people that are going to make the presentation for us. Director Teague.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. So as mentioned, this is a process that we've been studying really for the last 4 years. It's transitioned into a part of the 2018 Comprehensive Plan update. So this is the Southdale District Plan. And one of our co-chairs, Michael Schroeder, along with other co-chair Colleen Wolf, have worked tirelessly over the last, 4 years as we've been going through this process. So with that, I will introduce Michael Schroeder, who will present the plan to the council.
Thank you, Director Teague. Mr. Schroeder, welcome.
Thank you. Mayor and council members, it's actually good to be here making a formal presentation at what is the end of a very long process for us. And as I go through this, I'm going to take a moment to do something that I forgot to do with the Planning Commission, and that is to call out by name the people who have worked on this process in this last stage, because I think it's important. And so as I go through this, and in fact, I think it's this first slide here where we identify the current members of the work group. And to refresh people's memories, we had representatives that were chosen by the neighborhood, representatives appointed by the Planning Commission, representatives appointed by the City Council, and then representatives appointed by business and property owner groups. So from the neighborhood in this stage, we have Colleen Wolf, who was my co-chair during this process, Julie Chamberlain and Chris Cooper. From the commercial property and business owners, we had Jim Nelson and Don Hutchison. From the Planning Commission, we had Ian Nemerov, Joanne Olson, and John Hamilton. And then as council appointments, we had Steve Brown, Michael Schroeder, that's me, because I've introduced myself, and Peter Fitzgerald, Amy Wimmer, actually didn't participate, but we have her listed here as well. There were others who participated at various times through our process, and I don't have them listed here, and I don't want to leave anybody out, so I'm not going to go through that list, but it was a really important community dialogue that we had from the very beginning. I'll also point out that we had great support from staff through this. Carrie and Emily were there at all of our meetings in this last stage, and as we moved through our planning processes in stage 2, we had great support from Mick Johnson and Sarah Crouch from Architectural Field Office, and in this last stage from several folks on the BECO Associates team, Dan Corneo, Hyla Mace, Jana King, and Bill Smith. Most of the first several slides that I would spend more time on deal with the process that we went through, and I'm going to skip through those because I want to allow more time for the public hearing if there's, and if there are other questions. And we've talked about this many times as we move through our process of updating the city council as we move through every stage. And even as we brought ideas back to you, we kept reinforcing that this was a process that was about dialogue amongst the work group, that we brought on consultants as guides and not as lecturers or directors. And this was a process that was founded initially in a community dialogue, and it was carried all the way through to the end. And as we posed some ideas about moving forward with the Greater Southdale District, we have some ideas about how that might be important in perpetuating. So if you recall, we have done our work in 3 stages. The initial stage was just about a dialogue. We got together, we met actually every week for about 2 months, maybe a little more, to come up with what we called working principles. Other bodies decided they should be adopted, but for us it was important to give ourselves a tool to begin talking to each other. And that was the focus of stage 1, is to figure out how groups of residents and groups of business and property owners could possibly find a way to begin talking with each other. I think a lot of people at the beginning thought we would fail, that we would never be able to figure out a way to have a great dialogue. And in fact, it was Jim Nelson who, at hour 3 in our dialogue, said, we are in agreement on just about everything we have talked about for 3 hours, and it was the tone that we matched all the way through our process. Stage 2 was about building a framework. This is where we first engaged Architectural Field Office and began to build out a pattern that related to the vision that we had talked about, and we actually went through a process of beginning to highlight some of those more pictorial ideas about what the evolution of the Greater Southdale District might be. So in stage 1, we had a dialogue. We were challenged by the City Council to come back with a framework and a vision. And so we engaged a consultant to help us through that process. And then in stage 3, it's actually 3 and 4, we actually moved that forward into a small area plan, which we now call a district plan because it's not at all a small area. And as Director Teague noted, to begin to have this form the basis of the comprehensive plan portion for that 750 acres that exist as the Greater Southdale District. This is where we are. We're in the southeast quadrant of the community. We have 750 acres. As we were moving through the process, it became important to us to begin looking a little bit at how the Pentagon area began to fit in, especially as kind of an outgrowth of the experience of France Avenue. And as we looked at how public spaces framed the desired experience that we had been talking about in the Southdale District, that became important as we looked at Pentagon Park. When we look overall at the documents that the charge we were asked to look at, we are delivering a policy plan. This was presented to the Planning Commission last week, and it was approved by the Planning Commission with a few amendments. And there's a companion document called the Design Experience Guidelines, which you're not being asked to adopt tonight, but it becomes important in framing how the district eventually evolves from the perspective of a human experience in that place. The third piece that we looked at is looking at the notion of implementation review, and I'll talk about that briefly as we go through the presentation. So it's these 3 documents that together we're looking to become the tools that will guide the evolution of the Greater Southdale District. And importantly, as we looked at it, there's kind of two arcs of time that become important. One is the time horizon of the comprehensive plan tied to the 10-year review, but also when we look at the pattern of blocks that we framed in stage 2, beginning to look at an arc that spans probably 40 or 50 years, because the guidance that we start to have here will not be realized in 10 years, but it will begin to shape what the longer term evolution of the district might be. In stage 3, we had 2 open houses. The first open house focused, there's a whole lot of slides that characterize more deeply what was talked about, and I'll skip past those. But we talked a lot about heights on France Avenue, and in particular, transitions to the area west of France Avenue, and even to be more particular, in the area around 7200 and 7250 France Avenue. We talked a lot about, and lots of comments were received on transportation and walkability. We talked about the design of buildings, housing and people, infrastructure, and there were a few questions about the process. The photograph you see here is one of the large drawings that we had developed with Mick Johnson to begin understanding how this really large area begins to come together around a really vibrant public realm experience. So we just characterized some of the input that we had in each one of those. And this people can come back and look at this. It's all been posted online. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through this tonight. We took the work of reviewing these 2 documents quite seriously. We were provided the first draft of this document in June. We went through a rigorous process of documenting our comments from our work group, and totaled 225 comments. When we got to the policy plan, we had more than 370 comments coming from the work group. And to our consultants' credits, they didn't run away from us with all those comments. They actually came back and delivered documents that were better than they were, truly better than they were when they first handed us the draft. These documents are the ones that were brought forward to the Planning Commission, and I'll come back and talk about Planning Commission comments on those in a minute. So, well, I mentioned already that this document is aligned with the comprehensive plan. It has sections that include our vision and aspirations, and that was important because that was where we started in stage 1, talking in a very aspirational way about how this district might evolve, and we have carried through those aspirations into this document. We have sections that mirror largely the way the comprehensive plan works in talking about economic vitality and competitiveness, urban design, land use, transportation and mobility, parks and public life, district services and facilities, sustainability, and water resources. So those things match up with components of the still evolving comprehensive plan. When we look at the document as a policy plan, we recognize that we have to start with a vision. We framed a vision. It's encapsulated here. It's actually more words than is shown in the lower left portion of the screen. We also had a series of 11 aspirations with bullet points to give people a better idea of how we were imagining the evolution of this district to happen. We also have goals, which were the really broad intentions, and then the policies that are the actions. So it's important to kind of characterize, and you'll see those as we go through, that the vision and aspirations are rolled into this, but the goals and policies work through in each one of the sections as intentions, and then followed by the actions necessary to achieve the goals in the plan. So important from the perspective of defining policy was urban design. And we actually wrestled with the term urban, and we came back and said, we're going to call it urban because it's not suburban, and we didn't know what else to call it. And when you look at the patterns that we're talking about, they are decidedly urban, with all the best qualities that you'd bring to that. Walkability, things that bring vibrancy and life to the public realm, quality buildings, great connectedness. So that term, urban, really fits how we imagine the evolution of the district. And in that first section there, we talk about pattern and connectivity, and that's where we highlight the 200 by 200 foot grid, which was a core stepping off point for us in defining the walkability of the district. The second set of goals and policies relate to scale and form, and that's about creating appropriately scaled development that actually adds life and vibrancy to the public realm that we're working so hard to create. From a land use perspective, we talk about the various land uses, and we talk about the notion that the density that becomes important in defining the district here. So in each one of these descriptions where it applies, we've noted what the range of density is. We haven't said specifically, so in the non-residential and mixed use, the first section here, we talk about a range of 90 to 150 units per acre. So we've done that for all of the portions that include residential uses. We have the map that shows how we move from existing land use to future land uses. And if you look at this, the diagram on the right, which is the proposed land use, there's basically residential uses in kind of the orange and gold brown colors. We have the darker purple, which is the perpetuation of the community activity center uses, which evolved from the 2008 comp plan. And then the large area pink that runs down the west side of France Avenue and actually through the Pentagon area is office residential, which was also introduced in the 2008 comp plan. One of the things that was important as we were moving through this, and it aligns with some of the other initiatives that are in the study, in the study being studied in the community, is the notion of a regional medical district, and that's highlighted in the north end of the district, of the Greater Southdale District in the blue. What became, so there was also a lot of study that we did of the existing conditions that helped us frame future evolutions. One of the things that was important to us was how we dealt with the transition at the edges. So even as we look back to the dialogue, actually really great dialogue that you had a few weeks ago as you considered 7200 and 7250, we're perpetuating and documenting that there is a transitional zone at each edge of the district. And we talk in a goal about the ways that those have to reduce conflicts and impacts, but still allowing for cohesiveness in the district. We don't get to, in this document, defining heights. That happens in this document. And actually, you actually use this document in the right way during your deliberations on 7200, 7250, because these are guidelines. You talked about them in depth, and you analyzed them, and you created the same kind of dialogue that we've been having as we move through our process to frame the plan. The other thing that we felt was important, and it's really wrapped around this idea of the design experience guidelines starting from the perspective of people, a person in the district. And that's the way that parks and public life become important to every piece of this. So as we look at our goals for parks and public life, there's the idea of a new Central Park connection reaching northward from Centennial Lakes, perhaps even leaping across town into Strachauer Park. Same kind of connection reaching westward from the district to Fred Richards Park. But importantly, looking for another opportunity for not the same kind of park that Centennial Lakes is, but the same magnitude of importance. We've looked at this and we've talked about it many times. Centennial Lakes as being a jewel of a park for our community. We think there should be another counterpart with perhaps a slightly different focus, maybe not so much on recreation, but maybe on social interchange and interaction, which becomes important in the north end of the district. We also talk about the need to populate these spaces with water and bring stormwater, not all stormwater needs in the district, but some visible stormwater into the realm of the public life as we look at parks and other public spaces through the district. The design guidelines are a necessary companion to this because, as I noted, the policy plan doesn't get into specifics, but we get into a lot of specifics in the design experience guidelines. And this is where we talk more about the 200 by 200 grid, the street rooms, and the more specific dimensional qualities around the street typologies. So excerpted from the plan, we show the 200 by 200 grid, which will not be strictly applied to the district. And you'll note here that not every block is square or 200 by 200, but the idea of creating a tighter grain of experience across the district was important. I'm not going to walk through all this either, but the primary components of the public realm are defined under a series of ideas of connections, intersections, the form of the street room, and the form of buildings as we move through this. And so this is where we get to a fair amount of specifics. There's a guideline under building form. In fact, it's the first one here that we say the first floor should be 20 feet tall. As we get to how buildings work against the edge of the public realm, there are notions about how that works under the street room form section. We also talked a lot about transition in the guidelines and around street room typologies. And this, on the diagram on the right, you kind of see this web of different colors. That really becomes important in defining how we deal with the changing conditions through the district. And this is where the work group probably pushed back the most. When we were first brought the street typologies for France Avenue and the transition in the neighborhood to the west, we had buildings that were 80 feet tall. We pushed back and we said the conditions are not uniform all along France Avenue. We needed to have some other consideration for an area that's at about 69th down to the south at Gallagher. And so you'll see that in our first street room typology, it addresses that area along Valley View Road across the area that you considered at 7200, 7250. And it was really important for us to get to the point of understanding height at France Avenue and a transition to the residential areas to the west. So we worked through a series of typologies. There's the other side of France Avenue in that same general area where typology 1 happens. We have the network of streets that are interior to blocks and how those are framed as a public realm experience. To the broader streets, which are considered our east-west streets, and then our primary streets, which are France Avenue, York, and 77th, reaching through Pentagon Park, where we have larger buildings and broader setbacks. We also have typologies built around it's called here the spine, but this is essentially the extension of the promenade reaching northward through the district and how buildings should be relating to that. We asked Mick to come back and essentially summarize, because there is a lot to dig through in this document and when you compile this on top of it. And he came back with 9 points that were important in measuring the guidance that we were trying to provide. And that's where this document, the design guidelines, ends up. But I want to step back to the policy plan, because one of the things that we realized through our process is that we gained a lot of understanding of the issues and possible directions by looking at things at a pretty high level. And as we would view projects coming forward, we would see very highly refined documents being brought to the Planning Commission, brought to the City Council, which almost precluded the dialogue, which actually did preclude the dialogue that was so necessary in our process. So as we rounded out our process and our policy plan, we talked about the design review process and how important it is to get back to what some of us might have considered sketch plan to be when it was first envisioned as a part of the 2008 comprehensive plan, or an outgrowth of that, where it was a chance to debate the merits of a particular project and actually engage in a deeper dialogue with the developer or proposer to make the projects better. So we've talked about that process, trying to encourage more transparency in the initial stages, the very initial stages of a process, trying to make it more collaborative between the city, the developer, and the neighborhood, and all of that trying to make a project that resonates more directly with the comprehensive plan and the design experience guidelines. We had a second open house in the middle of November. And again, I'm not going to run through each one of these comments. I did characterize for the Planning Commission that there were a whole lot of comments in here that you could point directly to 7200, 7250. And I note that because we have transitional areas being talked about at that one location, and there was one comment for the similar corresponding condition on the Richfield side that said something like, Edina shouldn't be a bully to Richfield. But there were many comments directed to limiting building height, limiting density, limiting traffic, limiting everything, basically, on the west side of France. It wasn't where we were going. We looked at it as a real transition, moving from, as noted in that typology 1A, a building that would be no taller than 35 feet at the west side, and stepping up to a building that could be 60 feet with some provisions, slightly taller, along France Avenue. But I did characterize some of those, and if we had an hour we could dive into each one of these, but I don't want to do that tonight. I will end here by saying these two documents, we're really pleased to be delivering these to the city. We're excited about how they will be used in shaping the future of the Southdale District. And I'll again emphasize, probably for Colleen Wolf and myself, the value of having a really dedicated group of citizens working with us through this entire period, and the ability to have the support of the City Council in urging us to keep moving forward, even in our very slow and incremental process. So thank you for your patience, but we're really glad to be done.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for this. Yeah, this is wonderful work. I'm going to recognize the folks when we finish up here, but questions for Mr. Schroeder at this point in time? There were, this might be for Director Teague, there were a couple of recommendations attached to the, or conditions, I guess, attached to the recommended resolution 2018-142, and that was, one of them was to remove pages 77 and 78 from the plan. These came from the Planning Commission. Zoning map and height overlay district, which were not needed, at least in the Planning Commission's determination, not needed within the plan itself. Would you want to comment on that?
That's correct. They're not needed in the comprehensive plan. As you know, the zoning map and the height overlay district, it could change from time to time, and we don't need to go back and amend the comprehensive plan to do that. So, yeah, we would support removing those 2 pages as well. And also, Commissioner Miranda had some recommendations in regard to the implementation section. A lot of them dealt with transportation. So the Planning Commission recommends those changes as well.
All right. And did the work group look at those at all, Mr. Schroeder?
Mayor Hovland, when we delivered these documents to the Planning Commission, this was our recommendation. So we haven't met since then. I've talked with a few members of the work group. We're not objecting to it, but we expected that the Planning Commission may have some changes, and we welcomed those. Actually, there were very few changes, and we might expect the same coming from this body.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you for that comment. All right, other council member comments or questions at this point in time? Member Brindle.
With regard to a section that could be, I don't want it, I'm talking about affordable housing and the affordable housing policy. As stated, the description of the policy that's in the draft plan is a policy that's been amended. So I guess I would refer to the policy and not try to state the text of the policy like 10% or what the various points within the policy are. I would just point toward it because it has been amended a couple of times. I expect it to evolve, and so I think it will allow this plan to be stronger if we don't try to restate it.
What page is that on, Member Brindle?
I should have written the page down.
Maybe in the upper corner
I will find
of your,
it.
Is it in the upper corner of your screen, or is that a different pagination?
It's no, it's telling me the page, but I'm trying to find where that is, and I will tell you when I find it.
Okay, very good. Member Fisher?
So, it's just terrific, and I'll probably make comments later, but, just reading through this, and I know, it's been a lot of work for a lot of people, but this document is amazing. And if you think about where this all started, it's all the more amazing, because there were a lot of folks in the neighborhood that were really having problems with some of the development projects, and what sprung from all that years later is a document that's more forward-thinking than anything that's come before us, before this. So kudos. I've got just a couple little edits that I'm not even going to bother with tonight. I'm just going to pass them along to staff because it's inconsequential in terms of what we're reviewing here. I would just comment, I was going to ask a question about the sketch plan changes, and you addressed that, and I think it was a really great observations on the part of the work group. I do have a question on page 86. There's just a diagram, it's building conditions. And The only concern I have with that is maybe there being a little bit more context to that, because when we think of building condition surveys, we think of that in terms of tax increment finance or other uses. It might be defined differently. This appears to me to be sort of a drive-by, how do the buildings look? In Edina, most buildings look excellent, good, fair, as this diagram shows. But you notice there aren't any that are listed as substandard. And in fact, there may very well be. I think we've dealt with some recently that you would consider substandard. So I would just want to be careful that this is put in a context with which it is, which is just sort of a quick drive-by, not inspecting buildings to determine if truly they are substandard. But that's a pretty minor comment in the scheme of things.
Good. Other council members at this point in time? Otherwise, we can get some public input. Oh, Member Stewart, thank you.
Yeah, I too, and I know, Mr. Mayor, you're intending to identify the team that's here. It's a remarkable piece of work. Member Staunton and I, at one of our earliest council meetings, were asked to consider with the council a proposal for 7200 France, and a site that we've long struggled with. And it was really that debate that led to the formation of this Southdale, of the first Southdale Working Group. It's morphed and now has become the Greater Southdale Working Group. And this plan is, I'm so impressed by the devotion of volunteers who just love our city and are smart people and people who take a responsibility given to them seriously and have done a remarkable piece of work. I know there's been a lot of feedback back and forth where we went to a lot of trouble to try to create a balanced group to debate the issues, to provide representation of a lot of different perspectives. When people in that group started to form a consensus because they learned things, because they came together, because they compromised and did things the way things are supposed to be done in good government, where things are working. I know there was some comments from the sidelines, people who felt like they were seeing results that were not the results they wanted and therefore must be bad results. But I say to the contrary, that I think the process has worked very well. And so I've been very impressed by the outcomes and by the quality of the guidance that this group has provided for us as a council. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Member Stewart. If there are no other council comments at this point in time, I'll open the matter up for public testimony. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to come forward and address the council regarding the proposed adoption of the Southdale Plan, Greater Southdale District Plan? Good evening.
Good evening. Arnie Bigby. I live in the Southdale District. I'm really happy to live in that district, 7621 Edinburgh Way, if you want the address. I think it's a great plan. I've read through it. I can't say word for word, but I saw enough of it to know that it includes just a wide variety of things. I, of course, love the presence of affordable housing and the frequent mention that gets in the plan. It also reminds me, because I walk one block to get to Centennial Lakes, and to dream about the possibility of creating a promenade that is going to link, possibly, the 50th and France area with City Hall and the property to the west of Highway 100, and possibly a promenade that's going to link 50th and France with the Southdale area. I think grouping all these things together and tying all parts of Edina into this whole wonderful, wonderful tapestry of a community that we live in, a very urban community. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Bigby. Anyone else wish to come forward and address the council?
My name is Nora Davis, and you know where I live, 6921 Southdale Road. I too am very impressed with the Greater Southdale District Plan. I've been attending those meetings for the past year and was totally blown away by the amount of work that the volunteers put in. I went to the work group meetings, but they had multiple meetings in between all those work group meetings. So that was truly a very dedicated group of folks. And I was very pleased that they totally captured the concerns of the Cornelia neighborhood. The transition zones, the overlay, meant that they really listened to what that Greater Cornelia neighborhood had to say. And the reason for my boots, they're brand new, as you can tell. I was delighted to see that they had picked up the water resources portion. That has been a big concern in our neighborhood, not only for flooding, but also the usage of water throughout the district as an amenity. I mean, Centennial Lakes is gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, and I'm hoping we're going to have a mini Centennial Lakes on our side of France Avenue. But again, it's a wonderful plan. I hope you support it, and again, my thanks to everyone who worked so hard on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Anyone else?
Frank Lorenz, 7151 York Avenue South. The plan for the Southdale area seems to somewhat ignore the realities that the city government should own up to. The whole Southdale area is unstable ground because over the last 3 million years, at least 2 glaciers worked their way down here from Canada, and then when they melted and receded, they left what we now call gravel. And when I was a boy, the Southdale area was a gravel pit. Now it's developed with buildings, but you have a problem of stormwater, groundwater, and now traffic. This plan is fine, except that it is not the same vision for the future that Hennepin County holds. Hennepin County looks at France Avenue and York Avenue as being conduits, and they are both county roads technically, but conduits to get people from Highway 62 to Highway 494. And if you've ever bothered to look, during the 2 rush hours that occur every day, traffic is gridlocked between 62 and 494 as people are using them as conduits. As you increase the density of housing or retail, you're going to be jamming more and more cars in to what is already a gridlocked period for 90 minutes twice a day. As you increase the density of housing, when people get up in the morning, flush the toilet, take a shower, use some water for cooking, and they all do that in the same 2-hour period, you're increasing the sanitary sewage for which the Met Council will charge you more and more and more money to handle, or tell you that you can't do it because their existing pipes can't handle the sanitary sewage. And if you're going to be pumping stormwater away from the areas of the individual buildings, which you're going to have to do because there's a limit to how many cisterns and how deep you can build them under the parking lots or the buildings that you plan to build on the Southdale area, because those things crowd out underground parking. So there is a physical constraint unless you're willing to spend $40–50 million up front to take care of surface water and the in and out transit of vehicles.
Need to have you wrap up. Thanks, Mr. Lorenz. Anyone else wish to comment on this proposed plan? I don't see anybody coming forward, and I don't hear anything from the audience. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and second to close the public hearing. Any further discussion on that matter? All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. And let's go back. We've got folks impressed with the plan, and Mr. Lorenz has some concerns about our infrastructure capacity. Director Milner, this is something that we've looked carefully at, and the study team may have looked at these issues as well, but it might be best to start with you with concerns about potential stormwater, groundwater management, sewer water, and then also traffic management.
Yeah, Mayor's, members of the council, this aligns perfectly with our comp plan that we're currently working on, and we've since updated all those models in this area with the densities that are proposed in this plan. So we're comfortable with what we have in place for certain densities, and as it starts to build out, we're going to keep track of it and see as what we need to expand and when we need to do that. So we're comfortable with the models we have and the documents that are going to guide us on that infrastructure question as development occurs in this area.
Okay. All right. Other questions, comments from council members? Member Brindle, with respect to the affordable housing policy, you wanted to have that referenced as opposed to quoting the policy itself, and you were going to check on the page
Right.
in the plan.
It's printed document page 19. So as I look at the document at the bottom, it says page 19, and there are several documents cited. And so the affordable housing policy, and the date on it is 2015. And since that document has been amended, is susceptible to continue to be amended as we work around inclusive housing throughout our city, I think that I would just like to refer to the current policy, but it is on printed document page 19.
Good, thank you. Member Fisher, page 86, was that the electronic page or was that the hard cover page?
No, it's the actual hardcover page 86.
Okay.
And
did you want to make some particular reference there? We talked about building conditions, make sure they're put in context. Was there any particular language you wanted to
Yeah, and I got to go back and
there?
see if the text covered it. Yeah, so it references that it was property condition assessments based on a rotating assessment. I think it's just simply adding a sentence that says what that assessment entails. I'm assuming it's just drive-by kind of checking the box as to if a building appears to be, what condition it appears to be in. So you could paint a building and make it go from, fair to good based on paint, but that doesn't mean it's a better building necessarily. It's a different sort of assessment. It's just simply to make sure that we're not eliminating opportunities or having sort of conflicting definitions in the future.
Okay.
Pretty minor thing.
All right, thank you. Let me ask my colleagues, with respect to the two recommended amendments from the Planning Commission, was anyone uncomfortable with those recommendations? Member Staunton?
Let me get to that. I also just want to, now that we've had the public hearing and heard from folks, I wanted to give some reflections on this as well. I just looked back as we were talking. It was March 26th of 2015 was the kickoff meeting, and I remember attending, and it was kind of in the wake of a contentious proposal at the 7200 France site. There was a lot of mutual distrust among people, and actually the whole process almost fell apart that night. But folks decided to take a leap of faith on working together to try to craft a vision for the future of not just the west side of France, but ultimately the entire greater Southdale area. And I'm thrilled with the results. I want to, I know you're going to recognize the members. I want to give special recognition to the co-chairs, Colleen Wolf and Michael Schroeder, who, were leading this thing and spent hours and hours and hours and, countless numbers of meetings on this and really kept it going through a long path. And so my gratitude to everyone who worked on it, but especially those two. One of the things that we have talked about as a council in terms of our goals has been, we have these 3 strategic objectives, and I think this is an example of 2 of those strategic objectives. One is planning for a connected and sustainable future development, and this plan is all about that. It talks about connections, it talks about sustainability, it talks about having a plan. Another one is fostering an inclusive and engaged community, and not only the folks who worked on this plan as part of the work group or the various iterations of the work group, but I also want to applaud the neighbors who engaged on this. Ms. Davis was up earlier and talking about the year that she's spent following it, and the welcoming of those neighbors into that process and the responsiveness, the comments that Mr. Schroeder pointed to that were changes to the plan, that were really directly responsive to things that folks expressed concerns about, is really exactly the kind of engagement that we're trying to work on. We have some areas of our community that are going to change, and this is one of them. And the question is, how are we going to go about planning for the future of that? And we're going to try and make that connected and sustainable, but we're also going to try and do it together. And I think you all demonstrated just in the best way possible how we can do that together and how we can set out a plan. And this is going to be invaluable for us, because when you think about the issues that we've had over the last few years, they really are a function of us not knowing what the big picture is. And this gives us a big picture that says, here's where the green spine goes down the middle. Here's where the West Promenade will be. Here's how we connect to Pentagon Park. Here's the size of the blocks that we're looking to create. Here's the feel that we're going to have. Right down to the design experience guidelines. It's frankly a really brilliant way of crafting the specificity about what the cross sections of the streets will look like. So that this notion of a street room, you talk about that, but that's really the notion of, we sometimes think about just buildings, but we don't think about the context that they're within. And you did a lot of thinking about how do the buildings fit into the context, and it's the public realm, it's the 50-foot setback in some places, the closer space in other places, and how some streets will be the access from the residential neighborhoods to the more intense center of the district, and how others will convey a boulevard feeling. And I just think it's been a terrific piece of work, and I am so pleased to see it come to fruition, and grateful to those who spent so much time on it. With respect to the questions that you raised, Mr. Mayor, I listened to the Planning Commission and especially Commissioner Miranda, who made some of these suggestions that were largely transportation related. But I listened with admiration to his urging that we be bold on some future things, and I do want people to realize that even though this is a 10 or a 20-year plan, really we're aiming for over 40 or 50 years. I think somebody told the story in one of the working groups of one of the working group members talking about a street in Bloomington that the final building had finally been built over the course of 50 years that was the last piece to the puzzle that they had crafted that long ago. And that's the kind of thing that we're going to have to wait for as this goes forward. So with respect to these additions, I thought that Commissioner Miranda's additions were really the kind of thing that is the ideal next step for us in moving this into the comprehensive plan. All along, as a council, we've had these small area plan working groups off creating plans or frameworks. We've had the Transportation Commission, we've had the Energy and Environment Commission, we've had all of our different boards and commissions working to try to craft plans for the future. And the final stage of that process is really starting to knit those together. And I think what Commissioner Miranda was talking about is how do we knit those together. So I don't necessarily see them as amendments to this small area plan or district plan, but I see them as things that maybe we should be tasking the Transportation Commission and the Energy and Environment Commission with commentary in theirs about how we can incorporate the small area, the district plan for the greater Southdale area, how these kinds of concepts can be incorporated into that. So I don't see them so much as a change to this as I do a good counsel for this next step between here and the final adoption of the comprehensive plan. With respect to the other items, I mean, the housing thing is fine. It is in a chapter that talks about the existing conditions, so I'm not alarmed if it stays, but if we change it, that's fine too. I understand Commissioner or Councilmember Fisher's point about just a record that isn't taken the wrong way about whether we've got substandard structures or not for future public finance issues. So with those items, I'm four square in favor of this, and with great gratitude to my friends and neighbors who participated in this process and made it all happen.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Member Stewart? Just some comments you wanted to make?
Well, I made most of my comments before the public hearing, but I too just want to extend my gratitude to the people who work so hard in this. Just, it's a remarkable piece of work. It's very comprehensive, and yet I think it provides us with a framework for discussions, because we don't know. Nobody has a perfect crystal ball. We don't know exactly what kinds of proposals we'll see 1 year from now, let alone 5 or 10 years from now. And yet this guidance will have to serve for that entire period of time, and really does frame what this district will look like long after I'm dead, and as an area for our children and grandchildren to enjoy. So I think it's a great piece of work, and my gratitude goes out to the group.
Okay, thank you. Member Brindle.
Thanks. You know, I've been reading the drafts of this as it's been going on, and development proposals continue to come in front of us, and so you look at the draft as it is at that time and gain what you can gain out of it, and so I mean, it's been amazing to see the evolution. I don't think that there are words to thank everybody enough for the time. To think that it's like every other Thursday for 3.5 years. I mean, I think about that, and that's not the only time you're working on this. It takes time out of the other days of the week as well, and it occupies a space in your brain that now you're going to gradually turn over for something else, but it's always been there, and that's what it is sitting here all the time, awake, asleep. Part of your brain is always thinking. And so the creative efforts, the insightful, I guess just insightful approach to this is really, it makes our job amazingly easier, because you've walked the walk before we do. I'm looking at printed page 87. And this is the list of projects over the last number of years, and there are some lines to be added to this over time. But this document, as far as this table is concerned, this is a list of projects that have occurred since 2006. And there are two projects that reference 232 apartment units, and one is 6800 York, which is 1 Southdale Place, and the other is 10 Southdale Center, the Metro Transit site. So I wonder if the assignment of the 232 units, which is 10 Southdale Place, or 1 Southdale Place, should just appear once, since the Metro Transit site is not a mixed-use site. Am I right? That's just a transit hub. 87. I'm talking about 87. Printed page 87.
Mr. Schroeder.
Mayor Helen, Councilmember Brown, maybe we should verify that as opposed to trying to figure it out tonight.
Yeah,
I'm sure
that's fine.
Director T can clarify that.
Sure.
and
I
provide,
just looked at it and I thought, wait a minute, there aren't any apartments at the transit center. So it's just a point to be clarified. But the detail, I'm a writer. I'm a technical writer, so I look at this and find little things. Nothing is worth even going back to do anything about. But, and I'm not even going to wordsmith it. I'm not going to bother to do that. It is really the volume that is here. It's unbelievably clean writing. So thank you very much.
All right. Member Fisher. Thank you, Member Brindle.
So I just wanted to, again, thank Michael and Colleen and the entire team. You know, Michael and Colleen, you're both my neighbors. Many of you are my neighbors. And also to the other neighbors that did participate through this process. You know, it's 3 years of work, but it's this isn't about a 10-year build-out, right? We've all talked about this is 30 years plus that this is going to impact. So it seems like it makes that seem like a really great investment. It was a lot of investment by all of you. You know, I just want to make a comment again about the sketch plan review suggestions on page 70. I think we should take that to heart and actually make that change relatively soon. And just as the Southdale principles became a thing citywide for a while, I think this should be applied universally in our city. I think when we came up with the idea of sketch plan review, the idea was really to have sketches and to have conversations and to have everyone participate in that and talk about what it could be before we're so invested in a project that it feels like it's too late to come up with other ideas. So I really want to emphasize that piece. One other comment I want to make that I really loved in this document is, you know, you think about this area and you think about Centennial Lakes and you think that this area has really great park infrastructure. So to read the piece that says we're underparked significantly on a per 1,000 people basis, this area really has too little parkland. And well, it really is a new meaning for underparked, but I really read it two ways. You talked about this area being underparked, and you also talked about in the future it's going to be overparked from automobiles. And the two will work very well together if we can create more parkland and less auto parking as technology changes. And again, that's why we're looking at a 30, 40-year outlook, that someday those two will come together just fine. And I thought that was really a great piece of all this. But most important, I think what you did so well, and it really comes through, is that you didn't come in and focus on numbers. You started from day one focusing on experience and how we all experience this area. And it shows up in this document. It shows up in the results that you got. And I think it was a great way to go. And I think it's the way to do good planning. So kudos to that. Thank you.
I joined the chorus of my colleagues and kind of reflecting back to that period about 4 years ago, and when I think it was Member Staunton and Ms. Member Stewart recollects they were just here fresh to the council, and we had this difficult hearing on 7200. And I think it was Member Staunton that suggested, gee, let's look at some guiding principles here and form a work group. And I recall how we put that together, and I don't mean to plow ground that's already been plowed here, but how it got put together, residents, business folks, and then those first guiding principles came down, and we thought, hey, these are really wonderful pieces of work. We can take these and apply them not just in the Southdale District, but on all of the development projects that we do in the community. And then you were back saying, we don't think we finished our work. We've got more work to do. Will you let us keep going? And so you came back a couple times and we said, yeah, keep going. And you've produced this product that is just, without a doubt, one of the finest things I've seen in the years I've been on the council. So my great appreciation to all of you. Would you all please stand up if you were on the work study team, work group team, please? And we can give you... And can't thank you enough for a job beautifully done. I love the on page 5 of the copy I'm looking at, the Greater Southdale District Plan, and I'm talking about this in an abbreviated sort of fashion. What it does for us: offers a vision and articulates aspirational statements for desired outcomes, provides goals and policies for managing and shaping growth, establishes a policy for design guidelines, guides public investment decisions to expand district services. Those are things that are vital to managing growth and managing development in the future, and you've set us on a wonderful pathway for all of that, so I thank you very much. We've got a proposed resolution with a couple of... Yes, yeah, Member Stewart.
Thank you. In addition to that group who just did phenomenal work, there were a lot of sort of volunteer citizens, people who just came forward and participated in the process. A couple of them are here. John and Sandy Carlson, I know, participated a lot in the process. Nora Davis is here. I don't see Gene Persha. I know he went to a lot of the meetings. Who am I missing?
Mike Kenfield.
Yes, Mike Kenfield. So there were a whole lot of people who contributed to this.
I think Mark Chamberlain.
Mark Chamberlain, right. Not just people who were sort of officially appointed to be on the committee, but a whole lot of input from a whole lot of people. And I think it's such a great example of trying to welcome all those various thoughts from various people. Of course, some of those thoughts are in conflict with one another, so the group at some point has to come to some resolution about where they're going to go. But I'm so appreciative of the people who are willing to come forward and share their viewpoint. And it's true, this is my last chance to say this, so when we as a council are considering things, people email us, they call us, they ask us to come over, and it is helpful for us, I think, to hear these various perspectives. It's helpful to hear viewpoints that are different than my own. Because of my own filters and things. So I really work hard, and I know my fellow council members work hard to keep an open mind, to listen carefully to all those inputs, and then to try to find the right balance for what's right for the city. And I think that was done here in a remarkable extent. But there were so many people who contributed that I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Yeah, thank you very much for doing that. All right, we've got a proposed resolution.
Bob Gubrud, he also contributed.
Yeah, right.
Member Staunton, do you want to make the motion on the resolution, please?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, I would move to adopt Resolution 2018-142, approving the Greater Southdale District Plan with the amendments to remove pages 77 and 78, which are not needed. With respect to the implementation strategies that are recommended, I would modify that to say that we make the recommendations to the Transportation Commission and Energy and Environment Commission as they're reviewing this as part of the comprehensive plan to consider those implementation strategies and in their recommendations to us on the comprehensive plan. And then the other amendment would be I guess to change page 19 to reference the affordable housing policy and to add a sentence at page 86 regarding the details of
what the assessment
the level
entails.
of inspection.
Right,
that's been done.
it was a pretty cursory review of the exterior appearance of the buildings there.
Get that, Director Teague? All right. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Good. Thanks. Another round of applause, please. All right, we've got one public hearing matter remaining, and that is a proposed comprehensive plan amendment involving properties at 7399, 7401, and 7505 Metro Boulevard. Director Teague has this matter as well.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. So this is the last comprehensive plan amendment to the 2008 plan that you will see. As you know, the Met Council has put a deadline of January 1st of this year. So this is it after this one. So this property is located on Metro Boulevard. It's just west of Highway 100, north of Edina Industrial Boulevard. The property is about 12 and a half acres in size. It's currently zoned planned office district. So here's an aerial shot of the building. There are 2 office buildings and the Primrose Daycare on the north end. The southern building is home to International Dairy Queen, who, as we know, will be vacating that site soon. So the proposal this evening is to turn that into housing, or at least the comprehensive plan portion of that request. So again, here's the zoning district, planned office district, industrial to the west. The public works site, for reference, is located directly across the street to the west. So this is the current comprehensive plan designation for this area. Again, this is the site here. It's guided for just office uses. To the west, industrial, and then to the south is the neighborhood commercial node. So what the applicant is proposing here is to turn that 12 and a half acres into an office residential designation that would allow housing on that site. So here's a look at the site itself. This is again reference to the 2008 comprehensive plan where we identified areas of change. This area along Highway 100 was not studied specifically as part of this comprehensive plan update. As you know, we're doing all the other the neighborhood nodes, those small area districts. So it was contemplated back then as potential for change, but the only study that we did specifically is that 70th and Cahill area. As you know, one of the recommendations from that 70th and Cahill plan, and actually it came out of the Big Ideas workshop that we held last spring, was to study the entire industrial district, which would include the office portion along Metro Boulevard. So the proposal itself, what the applicant would like to do is again remodel the existing southerly building into affordable housing, be about 135 units, all affordable. That first phase would also include a market rate building along Metro Boulevard. They would provide some green space and play areas for residents. And also this, one thing that we've talked about with the comprehensive plan is moving pedestrians in and around this district. There's very few, if any, sidewalks in this district. So whether it's housing or office industrial use, we want to provide better pedestrian connections. So they are showing the start of that. Later phases would include in the lighter shading here would be new apartment buildings. And then that northern building, the potential to remodel that into housing. So about 600 units in all. The density contemplated here would be about 50 units an acre. But the request before the council is not the specifics of that project. It's really just in regard to the comprehensive plan. If the council approves the comprehensive plan amendment, they would come back at a later time and we could go through sketch plan and the rezoning process. Just a quick look, this would be the remodeled south building and a potential for what the building could look like in the future for that new building. With a comprehensive plan amendment, the city has complete discretion as to whether say yes or no, the familiar chart that we look at. So the specific request is a comprehensive plan amendment to re-guide those 3 properties, all held under common ownership, from O office to OR, and the proposed density here would be 50 units an acre. So primary issues that staff and the Planning Commission have considered is the amendment to allow housing here reasonable for the site. So both staff and the Planning Commission are recommending denial, that we not support, for several reasons. The vote at the Planning Commission was 8-0. But first is in regard to the sanitary sewer system that would serve this site is at capacity or near or basically at capacity and may not adequately support this use. Turning office into residential is generates much more wastewater, leading to the need for a study to be done in this area. So what I'll do, I'd invite Director Milner up to talk a little bit more in detail about the sanitary sewer capacity issue that we have.
So Mayor, members of council, yeah, there has been some emails going around, so I want to make sure we're all clear on what the issue is. If you look at this graphic, it is not neighborhood pipes, it's trunk pipes. It's very specific pipes. So you can see those red pipes that go underneath Highway 100. It goes underneath basically where the new pedestrian trail goes over 100. And it goes along Hibiscus Avenue, Guilford, up Oak Lawn to lift station number 6, and then continues through the southeast part of Edina. So it is very specific to those pipes. That's the risk we're talking about. So it's not, if this project happens, it's not going to create immediate basement backups. It's not like it's build it and the backups. Those are some of the comments I heard too. So it goes back to this land use change that we just haven't considered for this area of town and industrial park, changing from industrial to residential with that greater water use. We haven't looked at it from a sanitary perspective, and we haven't looked at it from a transportation perspective. There's much different transportation needs when it's residential versus industrial. So there is a change of risk if there's a direct connection from this development. I can't answer how much risk, and we don't know at this point. So just a little background on how the sanitary model works and how this graphic is created. We look at meter billing information, and we also put flow meters in the pipes at certain spots around town, and we compare the data so we know how much flow is going through these pipes. We know the sizes and the slopes of the pipes, so we can determine the capacities. And we compare the flows to the capacities, and then we know roughly where we're at for how much room is left in those pipes. Those are average flows the first time. As you know, people use water a lot more in the morning and the afternoon, so there's these peaks. So we want to show what is the peak events of our sanitary system, very similar to the storm system. There's these peak events. So we need to use various peaking factors, and we've studied peaking factors in Edina, and they vary anywhere from 1.7 to 4, based on land use, where you're located in the system, different lift stations and stuff like that. So the graphic here has the estimated average flows, and then it peaks the flows, and then it shows how much pipe is being used. So the ones near Lake Edina is at that 100% capacity during those peak times. So if we add any additional flow, what's the safety factor? That's basically what we're asking now. What's that change in risk? That if something were going to happen, if it's a backup of the sanitary system because of root balls or a lift station goes down, how much time do we have to react to that system if something happens and before it gets to the basements? That's our key. We want to have enough factor of safety. It's like when you build a bridge. So this study looked at, the bar study that's referenced in the report and this graphic, looked at 4 areas kind of change, the Cahill and 70th. We looked at the number of units proposed within that small area plan, the draft plan. There's an area down on 78th in Bloomington that was recently developed, the Edina High School, and then up near 169. And long term, we feel we can support those areas with our trends of less water use, more new fixtures that use less water. All of our I&I and lining projects we're doing citywide within our street reconstruction projects. So we just feel we can handle those areas. This one, again, just hasn't been contemplated. So again, it's not an instant, immediately, or backing up basements. It's a change in risk. How much, we can't answer. Like Carrie said, we'd like to study that in 2019 to be able to look at ways to mitigate some of those pipes that are colored red on this graphic. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background on the sanitary sewer based on some of those emails that you guys have been receiving.
Thank you. So that's our first reason is that capacity issue. And then, as has been mentioned, this hasn't been considered for residential development. And we haven't, well, really it gets in, really these next three reasons all kind of combined together. So as Chad mentioned, we want to study this area to determine what the capacity is, what fixes we need to make in the system. So in doing that in 2019 could set the stage for what's been proposed in the CIP plan and is recommended in the 70th and Cahill plan is to study this the whole industrial area from 70th down to the southern boundary. So this was a word that was used a lot at the Planning Commission is this project just feels premature without doing those studies. As we've just seen with the Southdale study, once we have the plan in place, we have that clear direction on where to go. So with this project, it just seemed premature for us. So with that, staff and the Planning Commission are recommending denial of the comprehensive plan amendment subject to the findings that are outlined in the staff report and the resolution. Also want to emphasize too that, again, because of that Met Council deadline, the city really has to take action on this evening, whether it's approval or denial, so we can get that submittal, well, or not submit by the first of the year. But if the council does approve it, we do need to submit that prior to the first of the year. With that, we can stand for questions.
Questions for Director Teague or for Director Milner? I've got one for Director Milner. When I was watching the Planning Commission meeting, I watched the applicant get up to talk a little bit about your analysis on the sewer system and emphasize, at least from their point of view, that it was just a minute or a small incremental increase in the amount of sewage that would be flowing through the trunk system. And I was struck that was a question I wanted to ask you about at this particular sketch plan review or this proposed comprehensive plan amendment proceeding was, what's your point of view on their position that this is just a small incremental increase and really won't make that much difference? I know you've tried to explain what you're worried about in terms of a cushion, but I think with that particular point of view being taken by the applicant, it's important for all of us to understand why you've taken the point of view you've taken.
Yep. I don't know if you want to go back to the graph. Graphic. So this shows a portion of it. I guess I have a better one here. This is really the entire sewer shed of that area. So is it a minute piece of the equation? I would agree that it is very small. It is incremental. I can't answer how much today because we haven't studied it. But my concern is if we approve this one, are we going to get a whole bunch in that area? And then it starts to be an issue. So should we study this before we get a whole bunch of these requests, or do we approve one with not much of an understanding, and then we get a second or a third, and then we got to deny those for reasons that we maybe should have denied the first one? So it was that change of land use. It was starting to talk about that discussion of residential in this area. I mean, if the council feels strongly about the rest of the project, the merits of the rest of this, we could probably condition it on a no increase in risk to the system, and then we would have to engineer a way with the applicant that could be accomplished. So if there's a want of the council to approve it for all the other reasons, we could probably do that no increased risk condition, and then work with our consultants, work with the applicant, and try to figure out what that looks like with their project.
And when you say no increased risk condition, are you thinking over that whole proposed 600 unit plus development that would occur over time, or you're thinking of just that first phase where I think it was buildings D, E, and F?
I think we'd look at both. So we want to make sure we do it the first phase. Maybe by the time the second phase comes, I don't know what the timing is, but maybe in 3 or 5 years, we have a plan to address this issue. And we're already working towards that with our CIP. Right now, we have no CIP dollars slated for anything to improve this situation.
All right.
So,
And this whole area is set for study for sewer capacity in 2019.
yes, based on these comments today, yep. And then I think we need to consider a transportation study, probably 2020 or 19 too, to see if we flip uses to residential, what's that do to the transportation network over there, like we did in Southdale when we looked at those different development densities.
Okay. That prompt any other questions? Member Stewart.
This is for Director Teague. Assuming there were no issues with the sanitary sewer, would staff have a different recommendation about this, or is it really just about that issue, or are there more issues that staff objects to?
Yeah, there are more issues. While there is a lot of positives, the affordable housing, it's a significant number of affordable housing units, and that's a great thing. But being this is an area that we've targeted to do future planning efforts on, staff's recommendation would probably be the same, that we would want to do those studies before we want to introduce.
So it's premature then from that perspective.
Correct.
Other questions for Director Teague or Director Milner at this point in time? Director Teague, did you indicate to the applicant how much time they'd have to make a presentation?
Yep, about 15 minutes.
All right, good. Thank you. Gentlemen, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Kurt Fretham, Lake West Development, 14525 Highway 7, Minnetonka, Minnesota. I want to thank you and your staff for taking the time to review our application tonight. I wanted to give you a little background about ourselves. This is our company, Lake West Development. We've been in the business of land development and/or development work since the mid-90s. We've done a lot of work on the west side of town. We've worked in over 18 cities, done 57 developments in towns, including Edina. We've been here 5 other times that we've been approved for developments, Minnetonka, Hopkins, St. Louis Park, Golden Valley, around the Minneapolis Lakes, around Lake Minnetonka, Orono, Wayzata, etc. And one thing that's common about all these projects is they all are infill developments. And what's inherent oftentimes with infill developments is there's usually some hoops to jump through. A variance, land use change, a guide plan, rezoning. And I would tell you that a high percentage of them, I don't know the fact on it, we've had to jump through those hoops, including things like, we haven't had sewer before, so it's a new one tonight, but they're inherent with this type of development. I only bring it up because we're a solution-oriented development company. We look for properties that we can revitalize, that properties might be a little bit tired or a little bit underutilized, and so we think that this property is a good fit for revitalization, and much like the other developments we've done in Edina, 4 out of the other 5 that we did required variances, 49th and Westbrook, 57th and Tracy, 65th and Mildred, 64th and Ryan, including the one at 6800 Indian Hills Road. Often another product of what we do on infill is oftentimes it creates a lot of opposition. And so we've dealt with and understand and are good at dealing with opposition and getting through that. What's fortunate about this project is I'm sure there'll be some opposition, but I'm not expecting a lot of opposition, which is a real positive thing about it, that it must be welcome for what we're proposing. I wanted to flip here then to give you an introduction to our development team. I have with me tonight Perry Ryan. He's our vice president and also an engineer. Also in-house is our planner, Steve Eggert. Steve is not planning to give a presentation tonight. Perry is going to run through our development highlights. We also have with us our consulting architect, Peter Keeley, with Collage Architects. We also have with us our consulting third-party engineer, Jeff Schopek from Laux and Associates. We brought him in somewhat, he's a specialist in the sanitary sewer and has a team with them. He's worked with Sanitary Sewer. We believe that we can show that we've got some solutions that I'm going to let him address those as we get into further discussions on that. But I'm going to give the microphone up at this point and hand it over to Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Fretham.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Perry Ryan with Lake West Development, 14525 Highway 7, Minnetonka. So just going to go briefly try to maintain our 15-minute time period here. I started this with did you know? This group that's in front of me probably already knows some of this data I'm going to talk about, but some of this is for the public as well, and so just bear with me. You know your city better than we do, certainly. Just wanted to point out a couple facts. City population of roughly 52,000. Did you know that there's 21,000 total housing units in the city? Of those housing units, at least according to your city's website, 318 of those, or 1.5%, is affordable units. And this project is adding 151 affordable units just in phase one, which is a 47% increase. And so we think that's pretty important, and that's what we want to talk about tonight and talk about the merits of the project. Allow me to show you how our project accomplished this for the city of Edina. So again, this is a picture that Mr. Teague had put up, and this is the site plan. So let me talk through a little bit of the particulars. Why here? Why are we looking at the site? As Mr. Teague pointed out, International Dairy Queen has been at this site with their corporate headquarters for over 20 years. They're going to be vacating that sometime early part of the year, certainly by March. And so for the first time in 20 years, we're going to have this headquarter building, 113,000 square feet, under 30% occupied. And so it provides a great opportunity for us, I think, and a great opportunity for the city. With the current excess of office space in Edina and surrounding area, this provides a great opportunity to redevelop the area, creating live-work opportunities. You guys will remember from the 2008 comp plan, this is a high concentration of the workforce in the city. And it also creates a live-work node as one of the current goals of mapping Edina's big ideas. I'm just going to point out a couple things. Mr. Teague took a lot of our thunder here, but again, phase one, the only difference in the graphic that Mr. Teague had, we did show a phase line in here. Phase one is proposing to renovate the historic Dairy Queen building into 136 100% affordable apartments, so it'll be a complete renovation. Attached to that is proposed to be a brewery and a restaurant with outdoor park or outdoor patio area. And as well within phase one, this proposed building D, which is 150 market rate apartments, which as well would have an additional 10% of affordability. A lot of them common amenities on there. Mr. Teague also pointed some of this out, but just a couple highlights. Proposing a 20-foot pedestrian boardwalk way along Metro Boulevard, which attaches to a future greenway around the city, and we'll take a look at that. That's some of the big idea stuff we'll talk about in the 2018 tot lot, green areas, some reflective areas between the buildings, some of the common amenities with some bridge work over the creek. Again, some visioning about farmers market, areas along the boardwalk, and some informational signage as well. One of the things that we're envisioning is a future walk or a future trail up along 9 Mile Creek all the way up into the bridge area that crosses 100 and ultimately crossing over to Fred Richards Park. Some of the environmental positives are removing a considerable amount of hard space on the overall parsing and replacing it with green area and common amenities. So big component of this obviously is affordable housing. This is just a snapshot out of the affordable housing portion of the city's website. As you can see there, the city is recognizing the need to provide affordable housing to create and maintain a diverse population and provide housing to those who live or work in the city. So just wanted to point out a couple items. Again, this is just where our data came from, 318 existing affordable housing units, at least formally, within about 9 projects, I believe. Again, 1.5% of your housing stock. It does list some coming soon projects, 3 projects, totaling 34 projects. One of the things to note is we talk about affordable housing a lot. One of the unique positive things about the city of Edina, but a challenging thing for people that might need to be in that affordable range, and we're going to go through what those ranges are. The median income price of an Edina house is now a staggering $560,000, and most workforce professionals just simply can't afford to live in the city. Again, as pointed out in the staff report, the Met Council has mandated or requested the city of Edina by 2030, which is only 11 years away, by the way, 878 new affordable units. And again, we're proposing 151 just in phase 1. Wanted to talk just real briefly about what is affordable housing. I know there's sometimes some misconceptions. It's not subsidized housing. It's housing for our friends. It's housing for our family members. It's housing for people starting out. It's people in our neighborhood. We're proposing the 60% AMI with the funding mechanisms that we're looking at. And again, it's showing 1 bedroom to 3 bedrooms at $1,000 to $1,500 a month, where a lot of people can't afford the market rate of $1,500 to over $2,000 a month. 60% AMI currently for the metro is at $56,580 per year. These are Met Council resources. So why are we here? Why are we looking at this area? Mr. Teague also put up this document out of the 2008 comp plan, figure 4.4, conceptual land use framework, potential areas of change. This is just a blow up of our site, site number 5. That'll have some meaning in just a bit because we're going to say what it says about 5, which is our subject site. And again, it was contemplated really for the last 10 years since the 2008 plan that it is a potential area of change. And we're going to see what the comp plan says about this. Again, the next page in this talks about potential area of change. Just going to read a bit of the highlighting. It's identifying potential areas of change as an initial stage in the process of guiding new construction and redevelopment when it's proposed by private property owners. The locations identified in the section appear to be areas where change may occur. It goes on further to describe what is number 5, what were they pointing to? And this is again right out of the comp plan from the 2008 comp plan. Commercial office corridor, long-term transition is envisioned away from single-site commercial use towards a mix of predominantly office and residential uses. So this was contemplated under the 2008 comp plan. On the 2018 comp plan draft, Mr. Teague also talked about the mapping Edina's big ideas. This is a graphic that was put together as part of that. I'm just going to blow up our site a little bit, our subject site. As you can see, the site is along the, what they label in that document is Parkway Grand Rounds, and it talks about connecting neighborhoods and what is that. And this is kind of the reasoning where we came up with that 20-foot boardwalk area to connect it. One of the things I liked hearing on that Southdale Grand Plan is, isn't it interesting to see how these things are going to go, and they have to go together piece by piece. And so that plan will not go together in 1 year. It might take 10 or 20 or 50, and neither will this plan on connecting neighborhoods, but this project really implements a piece of this puzzle in creating part of this parkway. Want to commend Mr. Teague and his staff and appreciate the work with Mr. Milner as well on the engineering issues. This is a screenshot from the Planning Commission meeting of Mr. Teague's staff report pointed out 4 potential reasons for denying the project and 6 potential reasons for approving it. We appreciate there was more reasons for approving it. At the Planning Commission meeting, it was boiled down to really just 2 items, and although Mr. Teague showed 4 tonight, they're kind of all boiled down to 2 items. And I just want to make some comments on maybe some difference of opinion of these. So highlighted a couple items in here. One of the things we wanted to say about comment number 1 in the potential reasons for denial is it says the system's at capacity. Mr. Milner did a very nice job of talking about peaking factors. That at capacity is using the peaking factors, and it is up to a 4-fold peaking factor on averages. So I appreciate his discussion on that and his explanation. But it also includes full inflow and infiltration happening simultaneously, and the groundwater being saturated. So we may disagree totally on what that really means, and I know, Mayor, you talked about specifically looking at the notes from the Planning Commission meeting. We had a little maybe difference of opinion, and we've got, we think, some solutions today as well. Regarding number 2 about the area, number 2 comment says the area has not been considered for residential development. Goes on to further state it's never been considered for residential development. We didn't really do this in a vacuum. We did look at the 2008 comp plan, and just as a reminder what that last slide was, in the 2008 comp plan, it does look at this as a potential area change, and we looked at what it described Area 5 at on the potential area of change that, in fact, it did contemplate residential uses. At this point, I'm going to bring up Mr. Chopek with Laux, and he's going to talk just briefly. We did look at some potential solutions on the sanitary sewer system. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Jeff Shopik. I'm a principal civil engineer with Laux. We're at 7200 Hemlock Lane in Maple Grove. And so we've been looking at this a little bit, and we've had solutions to other sewer problems that kind of have the same peak issue. As Mr. Milner said, there's a peak in the morning where everybody's getting ready for work in their day, and it's usually a couple, 2-3 hours of the sewer flow. That's when the peak occurs, and then there's one in the evening when everybody gets home, another peak. And so there's ways to minimize that flow so it does not increase over existing conditions today. You simply put in a holding tank that captures the excess flow during the morning and evening peak, and you release it over time between the morning peak and evening peak. And then after the evening peak, after everybody goes to bed, except for a few of us that have to get up in the middle of the night, there's really little flow in the sewer. You can release that flow out all night, and in the morning the tank's empty again, and you can actually build a system that does not increase the existing peak flow that occurs today. So you just maximize it at today's flow by having a holding tank and releasing it after the morning peak, before the evening peak, and then at night to maintain the peak flow. We've done that in Jamestown, North Dakota for a major hospital. We did it down in St. Paul, designed a system for a barge channel system that they were using washing fluid and stuff to clean barges, and the pumping system was not adequate to manage the flow during those peak events. We just retained it and discharged it at the times when the pumps were not being used as much, and a lot of that is overnight. So that is a pretty simple solution till maybe the long-term, if there's a long-term solution, or that could also be it. And that's what the developers are proposing, not to increase the existing flow over what's today by using a system to manage that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chopek. Mr. Ryan?
So I think I've only got 2 more slides here. Just wanted to walk through, as I suggested, Mr. Teague did a nice job. This is an actual snapshot right out of the staff report under the reasons for approval. Just wanted to walk through just a couple highlights of those. They support a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. Number 1 just talks about the densities are consistent with those contemplated in the OR district in the Southdale area. Number 4, allowing higher densities allows the city greater opportunity to provide affordable housing units, which would help the city achieve its affordable housing goals. And again, just reiterated the Met Council guidelines. Number 5, there would be a potential for providing 168 to 200 affordable housing units, as we've said, 151 at phase 1. And number 6, traffic generated by housing is generally less than office uses. So our request, again, as Mr. Teague pointed out, is approval of the comp plan amendment to OR office residential and allowing phase 1 to proceed upon rezoning. And the reason we highlighted that really is this is a first step. All we're talking about is really amending the zoning from office to office residential. It's not approving anything else. We're going to be back before this board for either sketch plan or rezoning application. And so there's things to work out, certainly with Mr. Milner and his office. In all fairness, we talked very briefly about the system we're proposing regarding the sanitary sewer issue, and we state that as satisfactory resolution of the sewer concerns. That's a recap. It creates much of affordable needed housing. It's near a high concentration of employment. It revitalizes a tired, low-demand office market, implements mapping Edina's big ideas vision, and it removes oversupplied office space from the market. So with that, we'd stand for any questions. And again, we've got Mr.
Council
Keeley.
members, questions for Mr. Ryan or Mr. Shopek? At this point in time, I had one for Mr. Shopek. When you talked about the solution for the potential for excess sewage being handled by a holding tank that releases material in the middle of the night into the system, were you thinking that there would be a holding tank with respect to each building that's being proposed, or were you thinking of some tank that serves all of the potential buildings that could eventually be built?
So on the plan, we have a holding tank kind of in the middle of the project that would potentially handle all the buildings. So it'd be one tank that we'd pipe the sanitary sewer through, and that would handle the peak. Of course, the first phase would be minimal, and as things grow, we'd either build the tank to its full capacity up front or expand it as it goes. It's typically a concrete box, if you want to see like a normal septic system out in a rural system, but we've used them for urban areas also.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. All right, this is a hearing. No, council members want to ask anything further? We'll open it up for public testimony. This is a public hearing matter. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the council relative to this proposed comprehensive plan amendment? Mr. Griffith,
Mayor,
good evening.
Council members, Bill Griffith, 8300 Norman Center Drive. I'm representing Kin Properties this evening, and they own what you'll know as the Film Tech property at 7600 Metro Boulevard, which is just kitty corner to the southwest. Just a word about Kin Properties. Since they own properties that are office, industrial, and multifamily around the country, including in Edina and elsewhere in the Twin Cities, they are certainly not opposed to development. They are opposed to this application. As the staff has cited, it's premature. It's premature for the reasons that they've cited: traffic, transportation, sewer, and compatibility. I would simply state that your neighboring cities, in their comprehensive plan updates, are looking closely at preserving office and industrial areas within their cities. Because once those areas are changed dramatically and conflicts are built in with truck traffic and residential traffic, it's hard to unwind that. It's hard to undo that change. Tonight you approved the Southdale plan, an area of significant mixed use, significant pedestrian facilities that you envision in the future. None of that exists today in this office park, this industrial park. And when you look at the OR district, it's right on the edge of industrial. And so there's a whole industrial park to the west. And so I would ask you not only to turn this down this evening, but to give consideration for the long term to preserve this important area that provides employment, industrial activity, and services directly in your community. Because once that's gone, it's very, very difficult to get it back. So we support the staff recommendation. We agree with the Planning Commission's adoption of the staff recommendation, and on behalf of Kin Properties, would ask you to turn that down this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else who wishes to testify regarding this matter?
I apologize for talking so much, but I can't help myself. My name is Nora Davis. I live at 6921 Southdale Road, and the possible impact to the greater Cornelia neighborhood is our greatest concern. I worry about taking the risk. The sewage holding tanks, that's an interesting idea, but so are flush schedules and outhouses. We could do a lot of different things. But what if that sewage holding tank fails? That would be frightening in that neighborhood. And I get a little bit concerned about always using affordable housing as kind of a, you know, if you don't do this, you're against affordable housing. I really don't think the city has an idea of how much affordable housing is already here. Mike Fisher was in my neighborhood before Estelle and said, my house was affordable, but I don't think I'm listed anywhere. So we do need to have a better handle on what kind of housing that we have here before we start making all these adjustments and getting all concerned, because I think there's more affordable housing here than people realize. And I know there is a large apartment complex in the Southdale area that is currently offering some incredible incentives to get people to move in. When you tell people you sign a lease for 12 months and we'll give you 2 months rent, I mean, that's incredible, and I think that says something too. So I think we just need to stop and take a breath and think about all this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis.
You know, Nora, your rubber boots could have been a visual aid for this one, too.
They were at the Planning Commission.
Yeah, I thought so when I was watching that live. I thought that was where you used your rubber boots. Anyone else? All right, seeing no one coming forward, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion second to close the public hearing. Any further discussion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And let's see. Director Milner, give us your thoughts on that proposed solution from Mr. Shopik, putting in a holding tank that releases material in the middle of the night, holds it until the appropriate time. I just preface that by saying, don't we have a similar situation with respect to the Weston? Didn't we have them put in a tank, a holding tank there?
We didn't. That was a proposal to meet certain conditions, but then they looked for other ways to do it. So
Okay.
it wasn't
Never
approved.
did that.
We didn't do it there. I thought of
Okay.
the same thing, and I just heard this idea at 3-something this afternoon. So I was going to look back at the history on that, but I didn't have time. So
Okay.
my initial thoughts are we don't have these in town. So I don't know how they work, how they operate. I think it goes to the point that I talked about earlier about this no increase in risk to those downstream properties. Sounds like Laux has some experience with this. I'm sure we could look at what the advantages and disadvantages are and try to design either this system or something similar that could address that risk, at least with phase one or the entire phase, and then it might be something that we could implement with future things in this district if needed before we could study it and do some capital improvements to either upsize that line along Hibiscus or do other things to reduce the flows. So at this time, I don't know if it's a yes or a no, but I think we can condition it with that risk equation, and then we can figure out what that looks like.
Okay, thank you. Were there other questions that other council members picked up on? Is there someone who would like to lead off the conversation? Member Brindle.
Sure. I wrote down a number of things to talk about. So excess office space in Edina. when the Dairy Queen building is vacated, what indication do you have that that space is not going to fill?
I believe the numbers are, once that vacates, it's going to be down to about 33%, and they've been, before they offer the property for sale, they've been trying for quite a few months with their brokers, and we're just unable to fill it.
Okay.
And so
All
based on
right.
that and conversations with the brokers that we worked with on it.
All right. So why dedicate an entire separate building to affordable housing? Why not have affordable housing in every building?
Well, we are proposing to meet the 10% affordable housing goal in all of the other buildings, but we just really wanted to kick it off. We took a look at what the goals were that the Met Council is stating, 873 in the next 11 years, and with 34 being on the books, I don't know what the dates are for those coming ones, but we really just thought this was a great opportunity to do it.
Looking at the slide in your presentation where you talked about 60% AMI,
Yeah.
the income level that you quoted there is for a family of 4.
Yes, it is. Yep.
And though you don't identify it that way, and I think it's important that you identify it that way.
Sure. I think we only
because
highlighted those.
I guess I don't see a family of 4 being your typical renter in that area. I think it's going to be singles and couples, more so than a family of 4.
Sure.
So I guess I would like to have seen a more complete picture of who you think your renter is, because I kind of disagree with the prediction that you're going to appeal to a family of 4. So there's an enormous amount of surface parking.
We're taking quite a bit out.
Well, I understand, but an enormous amount of surface parking would remain. Certainly, it looks like if you take the building space, the remaining space is a majority of surface parking. And I know that there's some green space that you show on the east side, but isn't there a way to do underground parking? Isn't there a way to minimize that surface parking?
Yeah, we are proposing in all of the new buildings that there would be underground parking. I think in phase 1, we're reducing the hard surface by approximately 50%. In the future phases, it's slightly less than then just because we're putting a lot of the amenities in phase 1. But we would certainly work with staff, and we would love to take out additional parking as well, as long as we can meet the parking requirements for those units. One of the nice things is, for instance, on the office side, whenever that next office building would be converted, the uses for office are on a trend going down, and so we may pick up some additional spaces there. So we don't want to overpark it either. We'd like to put it as low as we can.
Okay.
I think Manager Neal maybe wanted to provide some enlightenment.
I was just
Oh, okay, sorry.
Your Honor, members of council, I was just going to point out that at this point, we don't have a sketch plan or a site plan to review at this point. It's just illustrative of what they'd like to do. So it isn't anything you can hold them to at this point.
I see.
It's just an example of what they might do if you give them this, if you give them this comp plan amendment.
I see.
So that's what stage of the review process we're in right now.
Understood.
Okay.
All right. Well, those are the questions I came up with.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Member Staunton?
So a couple of things I can appreciate. I want to start with a comment that Nora Davis made, because it is something that I've also been raising in terms of us having a better handle on knowing how many affordable housing units we have in our community. I can sympathize with Mr. Ryan trying to look that up and looking on our website, and we have a place where we are trying, for the purposes of making our policy work, to let people know where in new properties there might be affordable housing opportunities. But I think it's probably not accurate to say there's 312 units of affordable housing in the community. I think it's way more than that. But in fairness, we need to figure that out, and we need to accomplish that. Regardless of what the number is, it would be nice, and we are looking over the next 10 years, and I characterize it as Met Council kind of calculating what they anticipate our share of the region's affordable housing would be over that period of time, and it is in that 878 area range, and so having some affordable housing would help with that, and so that from that perspective, this is an attractive project. The other thing that I'd like to just fill in a little bit about is the small area plans and the areas of potential change, or the potential areas of change. You accurately recite what is in the comprehensive plan, but if you go further in it, it does talk about the fact that in those areas of potential change, when we have projects that are going to change it, we should be doing some small area planning, which is really what we've been doing in a whole bunch of places around the community. 44th in France, we're doing it at 50th in France, we've done a lot of it in Grandview. We've obviously, as you saw tonight, done it in Southdale. And that's the big issue that I have with this project. The sanitary sewer, maybe it can be dealt with, maybe it can't be dealt with, but we're going to, at our next meeting, consider a small area planning report from the 70th and Cahill area, but it's just a small fraction of this whole quadrant. I mean, you can think of 70th and Cahill as that small commercial area right at the corner of 70th and Cahill, but you can also think of it as everything between 70th Street and 77th Street, between Cahill and Highway 100. And I think eventually that's what we're going to have to get to. And while I admire your attempt to take a stab at this, it feels a lot like it felt 4 years ago when we were faced with a proposal for 7,200 before we really knew what we wanted for the whole area. And while that makes your job more difficult because you have to read our minds, it also means that it's difficult for us to approve this without having thought about what all the possibilities could be. And to me, I think that Mr. Griffith made an interesting point about office. You know, I don't know whether that's viable or not, but I'd want to think through whether we want this. You know, in a recent symposium we learned that we don't have any Class A office space in our community. Maybe this is a place where we might want to guide the future for Class A office space. I don't know, but I want to grind through all those things before I get there. So I'm not concerned about as concerned about the sanitary sewer, although I certainly would want to make sure that's taken care of before we could move forward. But in the big picture, I feel like we're just ill-equipped to know what we want out of this future because we just haven't done the planning on this front. So those are my thoughts, Mr. Mayor.
Member Fisher?
Jennifer, could you bring up the thing I just emailed to you? So you very adeptly identified in the 2008 comp plan some reference to this area, and it made me think, wow, I have something on my computer here that I want to show, which is what that comp plan looked like when we as the Planning Commission brought it to the City Council. And we actually had, I think, yeah, this is a good one. If you just scroll to about the middle of the page. So you want to talk about a City Council editing our plan. So if you look at the area called GMU, General Mixed Use, that was our attempt, what we wanted to do with this area. You notice that is not in the plan today. But notice in the second column, the broadest range of mixed uses, including employment, limited industrial, office, commercial, and residential, with performance standards to ensure compatibility, includes areas in transition from exclusively industrial uses. We, 10 years ago, contemplated exactly what is happening here tonight. Can you go to the next sheet from the comp plan? And just scroll to that paragraph where it says Cahill Industrial Area. So we talked a little bit more in detail about what this might be, but more importantly, we talked about how we needed to really study this over the next, decade to figure out, because we anticipated the inevitable situation where these office buildings, these industrial buildings are going to come to a point where we're going to have to reinvest. And we saw a future that maybe it wasn't just pure office, pure industrial, but more of a neighborhood with all sorts of things, including parks and the such. So I commend you for what you're showing on your site plan. The problem that I have is that we didn't do the plan. We took it out of the plan. We went, and so here we sit 10 years later, and it's so apropos because there's a lot of commentary in our community right now about not doing plans for this or for that. But we have to always be planning out decades, and this is just a prime example of it. And the unfortunate piece is here's a property owner that needs to come up with the next generation of their property, and we're not prepared. We're just not. And as much as I would love to entertain this project, and it has all of the components that you would want to see, what I don't know right now, and just sewer system aside, part of what we would plan is what does the infrastructure have to be to transition this entire area? Where do the parks want to be? Where are those pedestrian connections? And, I believe there would be Class A office space in this neighborhood, but wouldn't we want it with a face on the highway where it gets the most advantage of the drive-by versus the residential, which maybe doesn't need to be right by the highway? And I'm just afraid that though you're presenting us something very interesting here, it might be the wrong uses in the wrong spot. And I just don't know. I don't know how to even answer that because we don't have the vision for this area. As it turns out, coincidentally, here we are planning in 2019 to get back to what we were talking about in 2008, which is doing a plan for this area. And I do think it is important to note that in the planning we're doing right now, the consultant doing the economic analysis for our different small area plans, I've talked to her just informally about her concern that we not give up too much, don't jump too quickly to an evolution away from industrial and office because those cycles come again and you only have so much of that area. I still believe there's room for both. There's room for all of it there in how we utilize, because we're just not efficiently utilizing that land in that part of our city, period. But I feel bad that we're not ready for this, but we're not. And I think we have to get ready for these kind of proposals.
Yeah, thank you. Member Stewart.
Thank you. I concur with everything that my colleagues have already said, so I'll avoid repeating that. The one thing I do want to state here, which it's been a bit of a mantra for me over the past 4 years, is when we get a recommendation of staff and a unanimous recommendation of our planning commission to approve or disapprove of a particular proposal, I think we are foolish if we don't pay attention to those who are really tasked with digging in very deep, understanding the proposals and guiding us and helping us make good decisions on behalf of the city. And so I am not at this time seeing anything that makes me believe that staff and the Planning Commission got it wrong. So I repeat that because I want people to understand that we, as a council, take very seriously the advice that we get from our professional staff and from our really amazing Planning Commission and other commission members who help us in our decision making here at the city. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Member Brindle?
In my previous comments, I kind of got into the weeds a little bit with what is being proposed here. However, I think there are enough red flags for me in this that I would be I'm uncomfortable pushing it forward with an affirmative vote. There's too much to be discovered. I understand that you tell us that the sanitary sewer risk can be managed by putting in a holding tank. However, I think of the 11 inches of rain we had in 2016 and the efforts that were made to keep sanitary sewer in the sanitary sewer and stormwater in the stormwater sewer, and they meet once in a while, and that is not a pretty picture. And when we are in a situation where we've got a line that is already full and you've got a holding tank which could potentially be full, and then you've got a rain event coming, that is kind of the unfortunate thing that will happen in the future. I mean, it's not a question of if it'll happen again. It will. It definitely will. We don't have an experience with a holding tank to know how it works in various situations, so we have some learning to do. This could, in the future, potentially be a good land use decision for us, but it's not something that that I would be comfortable supporting today without more knowledge.
Thank you, Member Brindle. I feel the same way as my colleagues. I might like this idea in the future, but not tonight. I just don't think I can fairly judge the project in the context of what we need to be thinking about over in that particular part of town. I will say that Lake West has caused us to have an important conversation this evening, and that is, should we study this area further before we make any determinations on future uses? And of course, we're going to study sewer and water capacity, or sewer capacity, and I think that also probably stormwater and drinkable, potable water capacity and traffic in 2019. More fundamentally, I think the question that Mr. Griffith raised is the one that was of concern to the council back in 2008, and that is, what's the future of commercial industrial office in this district? And for me at the time, it was the notion that I wanted to see us continue to have a commercial industrial office district, because we've got some limited locations for those types of activities, and it struck me back in 2008, and it still strikes me today, that having balance is really an important thing. And in terms of what our commercial industrial district, which is relatively small, might look like, in terms of it being a high-tech hub with medical device manufacturers, software companies, a better connected environment with sidewalks and some parks. I'm still uncertain about how I feel about housing, even if it's loaded more towards Cahill, which is at the far west end of the district, or somewhere along the rail line, if that happens to be something that becomes a spur in the future. Those are all things that I'd want to think about. But fundamentally, right now, I think it's important that we have a commercial industrial office district, and we not add residential into the mix, because once you add residential into the CI office mix, you create an instant constituency that now makes it difficult for the coexistence of CI in particular and residential. So I'm a little bit, well, I'm just like my colleagues, I guess. I'm not ready to do anything on this. We need to study it more. I'm willing to take a look at the future of CI and office in this district, even residential, but it's going to take some work on our part to get there, and it's just, for me, it's not going to happen tonight. I'm not prepared to support the comprehensive plan amendment that would change this from office to office residential. Member Stewart.
Yeah, you reminded me, I live on the edge of Edina near 169, and on the other side of 169 in Minnetonka, there is a building that had been a commercial building that was converted into an apartment building called Cloud 9, and I don't think it's ever been fully occupied. I think I don't think they were trying to do affordable, however. It doesn't have balconies. I mean, there are a whole lot of things that are odd about it, and it's surrounded by commercial buildings. And so I'm I have some trepidation about making a dramatic change like that in the middle of an area that's intended for one use and then starts to get used for a different use. So that maybe is a cautionary tale. I don't know. The other thing, and it's not related at all to anything we're talking about right now, I'm so impressed that Member Fisher was able to find an electronic file from more than 10 years ago in about 5 minutes' time. That's such a really impressive filing system you've got, because I couldn't do it.
Do you think I'm harboring any bad feelings from 10 years ago that I keep it on my laptop?
That's amazing.
Is that a problem?
Did you see him glaring at me in the process? Well, you've got a very good team. Mr. Keeley, we know, is a first-rate architect, a very fine architect, and we've seen his work in the past. And but you can tell from the thoughtfulness of this council that we're just not ready to talk about this yet. So, but thanks for thinking of ways to introduce new opportunities for people and places for them to live in Edina. Thank you, Mr. Ryan.
We need to vote.
Yeah, we do. We've got a motion to adopt Resolution 2018-140, which would deny the request for a comprehensive plan amendment to go from O office to OR office residential at 7399, 7401, and 7505 Metro Boulevard. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution denying this comprehensive plan amendment?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion second on Resolution 2018-140, which would deny the comprehensive plan amendment that was requested to go from O to OR in the specified area. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the resolution say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you, gentlemen, for being very, very interested in our town. All right, we're going to move on to the reports and recommendations portion of the agenda. And first matter in that section of the agenda is a proposed redevelopment agreement with Orion 4500 France LLC. And Mr. Neuendorf has this matter. This is a follow-on to some of the other work we've been doing down at 4500. And I had an email today from one of our residents, and I think I passed the email on to Mr. Carlson, and I didn't get a chance to check to see if you'd had the ability to respond, but bear with me, and we'll have Mr. Neuendorf speak first.
Great, thank you, Mayor and council members. The agreement in front of you this evening is a TIF redevelopment agreement with Orion 4500 France LLC. This is the legal entity led by Ted Carlson of Orion Investments. Ted and his partner, Nino Pedrelli, approached the city about a year ago with their intention to seek redevelopment of the former Edina cleaner site at 4500 France Avenue. That site has been vacant for about a year now after that business sold their retail operations and moved their industrial operations to a different facility. There have been several steps along the way as the city has worked with the developer to find a way to work together. And you might recall that in the initial round back in May, there were several questions and shortcomings that staff found with the initial proposal that was put in front of us. But since that time, the developer has done a great deal of work, sharpened their pencil quite a bit, worked to secure grant funding from Minnesota Deed Agency to help with some of the environmental remediation on the site. And recently, they've acquired the property as well. So they certainly have addressed all the concerns that we initially had and really worked hard to make sure that this project is possible and feasible. But as we did review their financials, staff did so with the assistance of our advisors at Ellers Associates and Dorsey and Whitney. And we did confirm that there definitely is a financing gap in the project. For a project of the scale that was approvable at this location and that met the needs and preferences of the small area plan, there definitely is a financial gap in order to make the project feasible and buildable. And that's why we initially proposed terms of about $2.295 million in tax increment financing to be pledged to help fill that gap and get this project kick-started. In early October, staff did present a term sheet at both the Housing and Redevelopment Authority conversation level and also here with the City Council, and those terms were approved back in October. So for the last couple months, we've been working with with special counsel at Dorsey and Whitney, working with the developer's attorney to transform those terms into a full binding legal document. At this point in time, we're confident that the document that's in your packet and in front of you this evening does comply with those initial terms and conditions. A lot of the detail that had not been worked through in the initial terms did get great scrutiny, and that's why the final document is about 150 pages rather than the initial 6-page terms document. This evening, both Mr. Anhut and Mr. Lindgren, the city's advisors, are with us in the audience. Ted Carlson, the developer, is here with us as well. So we have the report in the packet. I'm happy to answer any questions, but we've also discussed this at the Housing and Redevelopment Authority recently. So I'll leave my comments stand at that point, or at this point, but please know that the full contingent is here to answer any questions you might have.
Good, thank you. Questions for any of our team, Mr. Newendorf or Mr. Lindgren? Yes.
We have the number right?
Yes, yes. My apologies. There was a typo in the staff report, an important typo because it talked about hundreds of thousands of dollars. But we corrected the typo, and just to confirm, the documents, the legal contracts, the term sheet, those are the correct numbers. It was simply a typo in the staff report.
Okay, thank you.
It is at 2.295.
That's correct.
The correct number. Correct. I think the other one was in the 2.7 range or 2.9 range somewhere.
We missed a 2. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Mr. Carlson, could you come up for a minute, please? We got some correspondence this afternoon from Cheryl Appledorn, who lives in the neighborhood. And you know Ms. Appledorn, and the two questions she raised was one that I don't think she probably watched this meeting because Member Stewart raised the same issue, and that was the so-called pork chop at 44th, or at Sunnyside and France Avenue. Is there anything that can be done about the pork chop? We talked about this before. It looks like the county is pretty stubborn on this, but can you give us any up-to-date information on the pork chop, either expanding it or removing it, making it function a little bit better relative to its location?
Yes, Mayor, council members, thank you for having me tonight. We've explored the pork chop numerous times with staff led by Chad and his team, and the resounding feedback from Hennepin County has been not at this time.
Okay.
Well, I would just add, it's not even Hennepin County. We looked at turning templates of buses and garage trucks, and with that acute angle, you would actually, in my opinion, make it less safe for pedestrians by getting away from that pork chop. And I think by what Ted's doing with the power lines and the power poles, those are going to be out of the pork chop. So it's going to be a little better situation there now that 2 poles are being removed from that pork chop. So it's that acute angle again that's really causing those concerns about trying to remove that thing.
Okay.
The suggestion is not to fill in between the curb and the free right turn and the pork chop so that you have the acute angle you have to turn. It's to get rid of the pork chop and you still have a good turning radius there, although pedestrians would probably have to move the crosswalk further up Sunnyside in order to have a safe crossing distance.
Well, and that distance gets longer then for pedestrians on the pork chop when you're basically pulling that whole south. So there's those trade-offs one way or the other, and we felt the way it was the best situation.
Okay. So the present status on the pork chop is it stays as is, but we get rid of the poles in the pork chop.
Yep, and then we look to work with Hennepin County for trying to cross France. What can we do to improve those crossings, just like what's called out in the small area plan for Sunnyside in France and 44th in France.
Okay, and then her other question was with respect to the burying of the power line, how far north or south do we go? We talked about that last time too, I think, when we did final approval. But nonetheless, would either of you restate that, Director Milner or Mr. Carlson?
Good.
Where are we?
Yeah, we've been active discussions with Xcel Energy and then flows down to Comcast, CenturyLink, Zayo, and Arvig, which are the telecom providers. And I think as of today, this is active, we have 9 power lines being removed from south of our project north. The pole that would need to remain is the first pole south of 44th. That was in Xcel Energy's initial response to our request. We've pushed back on them. We've had Chad and his team on site with Xcel to say we want to get the power poles north of 44th. And we're still awaiting a response from Joel Root at Xcel, who's chairing that project. So it's with all intents and purposes, we'd like to take the lines as far north as possible. It's if it's within any realm of reasonable with Xcel Energy to do so. Did I state that correctly?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is there's transformers on that pole, that north pole, and that when you start to move those, that's where it gets really difficult to try to find a new spot for that. And it goes in all directions. So that's the real difficult part of, can it be done? Yes, but it's going to be a pretty major effort. So that's where we're waiting for that answer from Xcel yet.
So that, I think her question was whether or not we could bury the line to a point where it would be north of the old Durr building, but it sounds like this transformer, the pole that holds the transformer is on the south side of the building.
Yeah, it's on the south side of the building, and furthermore, it may require another pole to accommodate the infrastructure that's currently above ground, so it's much more complicated than you might think. As a property owner in the area of properties beyond the one in front of you for consideration tonight, I think we'd certainly be supportive of any greater plan for the area that further buries poles, creates parking, creates a business district, whatever it may have it. I've also met with Ms. Appledorn one-on-one to address these concerns. So.
Oh, okay, good.
But in any event, we're talking about a pole that's on the north side of 44th Street, but the south side of the building?
No, it's located just south of 44th Street. So it's between Sunnyside and 44th. That's a pole that has a chance.
Right, and that's not what we talked about in the condition. We talked about going north of 44th.
Correct. The condition that we'd agreed upon was that we'll use all reasonable efforts to make it north of 44th. But the efforts, and this is straight from Xcel, and Chad and team have been on site and looked at it. There's transformers on the poles, which compounds the process by a magnitude of 10.
Yeah, I don't know that it said all reasonable efforts. I thought it said bury the power lines to the north side of 44th.
Because you'd have to access multiple buildings in Minneapolis and on the Edina side service. So we're just giving you what Xcel's been telling us.
Well, I don't think the issue's over with. I mean, my understanding was, yeah, I mean, I understood you said that at the Durr building, we weren't going to be able to, you know, at that time, you didn't think we could do it from the Durr, you know, any further north than the Durr building, but I understood it to be north of 44th, that we were going to get rid of all of the power lines up to the Durr building. So if now we're talking about the south side of 44th on that corner, ugh, I don't like that.
We'll talk about it. Staff and Mr. Carlson will talk about it.
Michelle Swanson, that's who we know. That's whose wall we've all visited.
She doesn't have, she's still got her retaining wall.
Anything else?
No, thank you, Mr. Carlson. Those weren't actually germane to the issues, germane to the agreement itself, but I wanted to ask either Mr. Anhut or Mr. Lindgren whether there were any differences in this agreement between, as opposed to the approved term sheet that we had when we gave final approval. Anything that's happened that's different or substantive between the last meeting and this meeting?
Mayor, council members, good evening. Jay Lindgren. I think Nick and I are in agreement, and I think Bill mentioned as well that it's very consistent with the term sheet. You know, certainly there's things that are fleshed out, but I don't think anything has changed significantly, and we stayed by that throughout drafting the agreement.
Okay. Nothing that was so consequential that you would tell us not to do it. You got it in a position where you want us to approve this agreement, or suggest we approve this agreement.
I do suggest that this is a very consistent agreement with the kind of actions that you've taken in the past, and I don't think there's anything in here that's a surprise, from my opinion.
Okay, good. Mr. Anhut, do you concur?
Thank you, Mayor. Nick Anhut from Mellers and Associates, and we would definitely concur with that, and we use those terms and made sure to follow through on them.
And Mr. Neuendorf, you're comfortable recommending from a staff standpoint that we enter into this agreement, redevelopment agreement with Orion 4500 France?
Yes, I am. I think this is a strong proposal for that corner. The property's been vacant for over a year. One of the things that's attractive about this project is not only does it satisfy many of the preferences in the small area plan, but it brings action quickly to the corner before it starts being vandalized, before you start getting broken windows and it becomes a nuisance to the neighbors. In fact, if you go out there, the developer has already started work in some of those vacant buildings to get prepared for demolition. So I think it's certainly in the city's best interest to move forward with this redevelopment agreement and see a new project and see a new investment in the corner.
Okay. Council members, any further questions? Otherwise, we could entertain a motion to approve the redevelopment agreement with Orion 4500 France LLC and authorize staff to implement the terms of the agreements. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Got a motion and second with respect to the approval of the redevelopment agreement with Orion 4500 France LLC, which also authorizes staff to implement the terms of the agreements. Any further discussion?
I have a question.
Yes.
And that is, I'm looking at the approved term sheet under public benefits. And what Member Staunton was asking about is item 6, bury overhead utilities throughout the majority of the neighborhood node. So what we're hearing is that's a difficult proposition, and it's going to be difficult to do. Do we know, are we confident that it can get done? If it can't get done and it's part of the approved term sheet, what do we do?
Mayor and Member Brindle, so the city gets involved in the overhead power line issue on two different levels. In the TIF agreement, we're agreeing that when the developer incurs the cost to bury some of those utilities on someone else's property, the public way, that will help cover some of those expenses. In fact, in the table, let's see if I can find it, in the redevelopment agreement, it's on page 14 of the agreement. We've currently estimated about $450,000 as the cost to bury some of those off-site utilities. We did include as part of our negotiation recognition that some of those numbers could change. They might go down a little bit, they might go up a little bit. So we have about a $200,000 leeway built in case we can save money on one end. That might create an opportunity to finance some other improvements like additional off-site power line improvements. So from a TIF agreement, I think we're in good shape. But the other way that the city gets involved in the power poles is in the redevelopment in the rezoning. So certainly if the conditions of rezoning identify a specific pole that needs to be touched, that would not really affect the TIF agreement, but I think that would involve planning and development's review.
That's correct. There's a specific condition in the final rezoning resolution that was approved this evening in regard to the power poles, and it stated that the overhead power lines must be buried from 4540 France Avenue to the intersection of 44th and France, subject to approval conditions of Xcel Energy.
Okay. And that's what's being approved tonight.
That was the resolution approving the rezoning, not part of the TIF agreement.
Oh, okay. I see.
Well, I mean, I'll just say my understanding was it was to the Durr building. That's what we talked about. And the subject to conditions by XL can't be an exception that swallows the whole condition. I mean, if XL won't do it, then that would be a reason not to bury any of the power lines. And that's not, I mean, this was a big part of the deal. So I want to see us get those power lines buried.
I can just mention one other item. So related to the redevelopment agreement, we have flexibility because in this agreement, we don't say exactly which poles are being touched or not touched. So there's some flexibility on our end. But I know relating to what we just went through on the north parking ramp, there was one power pole with transformers. I think we moved it 3 times because once you put a transformer on it, you just can't disconnect someone and leave them stranded. So you've got to move it temporarily and then hook them up and then relocate it and then hook them up again and then remove what you just put in the first time. So the costs go, you know, they don't go up a little bit, they really jump up there. But to my point is from a public finance perspective, we can certainly look at what other options exist, what other revenue or financing options, whether it be through Hennepin County or through the electric company or through the redevelopment agreement and the developer. I'm happy to look into that further.
I mean, I don't care about the details. I want the deal that I thought we had. So that's.
Doesn't the language you just read reflect the deal? Along with the term sheet that says bury overhead utilities throughout the majority of the neighborhood node?
My memory of what we talked about comports with Member Staunton's memory.
Oh, we've got a written document that says something a little bit different.
Well, it doesn't really.
Well, it says it's subject to Excel's approval.
But that can't be interpreted to swallow the whole.
Yeah, I read it as
how
those
they want
power
us to
lines
do it.
must be buried. Yes, subject to conditions they may put on.
Right, on
the
how they're
burying of
buried
the
or
lines.
where they're buried or how we do it. We recognize they're the experts on how to do that. We're not going to tell them how to do it, but. And that was, I mean, a big part of the tax increment financing is also recognizing these are public improvements. This is part of what we're getting in exchange for this project. So I want to see us get north of 44th Street. I think that's the bargain we had.
All right. So we'll continue to escalate this with our colleagues at Excel.
Yeah. I'm confident we can work something out with them. Should have held that out before we went to visit the wall. It's just a joke.
You're not allowed to joke.
All right. Member Brindle's question was a good one, and so we've still got the motion in front of us to approve the redevelopment agreement with Ryan 4500 France and authorize staff to implement the terms of the agreements. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And next, ordinance 2018-18, amending the solar zoning ordinance. Ms. Costella, our city management fellow, has this, and our sustainability director, Tara Brown, is with her as well. And you've made some modifications to this proposed ordinance 2018-18, I believe.
Mayor and council members, that is correct, and I have a short presentation to just go over that, and then we'll answer questions. This presentation is about ordinance number 2018-18, amending the solar zoning, and this is the second reading for that ordinance. Just a bit of background, a reminder of the ordinance change goal is to ensure that residents and businesses can utilize renewable technologies in Edina. Our city regulations and practices should not be a barrier to renewable energy. This ordinance addresses solar technologies, and utilizing solar is a great way to achieve our community's goal of reducing greenhouse gases 30% by 2025. There are 3 proposed ordinance changes. The first one is defining a solar energy system. This helps establish a clear foundation and an inclusive and comprehensive definition. And like the mayor mentioned, in response to the council's feedback on December 4th, staff added additional language in the definition to address height, and I will go over that in the next slide. The second change is on the accessory use. It's allowing solar to be an accessory use in all major zones. And the third change is on screening. It's exempting solar energy systems from screening requirements. So the changes from the first reading to the second reading. Responses to the technical questions on December 4th can be found in the staff report. One that we wanted to call out was the aesthetics and character of protruding solar panels. For example, if a residential house had a 32-foot height restriction and their roof was only at 28, could they potentially put an up to 4-foot solar panel on their roof? This new language states that solar energy systems are still subject to those building height restrictions, and it also puts height restrictions on the projection of the solar panel, 2 feet for residential roofs and 4 feet for commercial roofs. Currently, the language does not create a barrier to solar development, and working with the SolSmart Technical Advisory Network, staff drafted this language to address height and aesthetic concerns. Staff will continue to work with the SolSmart Advisory Network to be aware of the implications of our city code has on solar development. It should also be noted that tall solar arrays are extremely cost prohibitive and are not really technologically advanced right now. So most solar panels are going to meet these height restrictions. And if residents want to install solar panels that are greater than these height restrictions, they can submit a variance request and go through that process. Today is the second reading of Ordinance 2018-18, amending solar zoning, and I am happy to stand for questions.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Casella, Member Brindle.
Thank you. I have the same question I had last time, and that is in section 36-10 definitions, the first paragraph, the second sentence. Solar energy systems may generate energy in excess of the energy requirements of a property if it is to be sold back to a public utility in accordance with applicable laws. So that makes it sound like we have to give people permission to have their solar array generate electricity or collect energy in excess of what that property requires. And I don't know that we are in a position to say that.
Mayor, council members, so the sentence says that the resident may sell back. It doesn't say must sell back. It's only addressing if the resident property has energy that they never want to use. It's excess, right?
But why are we telling them that they may sell it back? There are other options for that energy. They could charge a battery to charge their car with that energy.
Right.
So they can choose to do with the excess energy what they wish without that sentence.
Mayor and council member, that is true. The definition was written to be broad and encompassing, and it helps residents understand that they can do that with their energy. It's not a mandate.
Okay, well.
So if you change that sentence to read, and may be sold back, it still would give them the discretionary ability to decide how they wanted to use it.
Yeah, that's what it says.
If I may, council member, I'd like to.
If you can generate, the way I read it is that you can generate excess energy only if you sell it back to the public utility.
That's how I read it. And that's.
Which is a weird concept.
That's how I read it, because there are other reasons to, I mean, you're going to, on a sunny day, hopefully, you're going to generate excess energy, and you have choices of what you do with that energy. I don't know that the options of what you can do with the excess energy need to be in this ordinance.
Mayor and council members, energy in excess is interpreted as through staff and through our Soul Smart advisor as energy that the property would never use, right? So they've charged their batteries, they've filled their home with heat. Anything above that, they're able to sell back to the Public Utility Commission.
The language doesn't reflect that concept that you're mentioning.
May I propose a modification of the language?
Sure.
If it said, halfway through the sentence, it says, the energy requirements of a property may be sold back, rather than if it is to be.
Yeah.
Or
we could just delete the sentence. That's easy.
Or the simpler way would be, solar energy systems may generate energy in excess of the energy requirements of a property, period.
That works?
Period. Oh, well.
Yeah, I thought of that too.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference, Member Brindle? Mr. Knutsen's idea is a good one in the sense that it allows them, it's permitting them to generate excess energy, and then there's no prohibition as to how they use it, or no mandate as to how they use it.
And actually, I believe the state law requires that the energy company buys it back from people.
If they want to sell it to them. Yeah.
Well, that would be fine. Just put a
Okay.
period right there.
Put a period after property and get rid of the rest of that sentence.
Because it's really the rest of the sentence,
works.
for me, that is confusing.
It's a good catch, because it's not structured well.
Okay. So, Member Brindle, would you care to move the matter with that change on a second reading basis?
I will move, yes, thank you. I will move ordinance number 2018-18, second reading basis, with the change to the sentence, solar energy systems may generate energy in excess of the energy requirements of a property, period.
And strike the balance of that sentence.
And strike the balance of that sentence.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried? Okay, good.
Thank you,
Good
Casey.
catch.
Oh, and we're right on schedule.
Oh, my, that is something to celebrate.
All right, we're on to Resolution 2018-124. Is there a motion to adopt that resolution, which is accepting various grants and donations?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion second to adopt Resolution 2018-124, which accepts donations on behalf of the City of Edina, requires a 4/5 vote. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Just a quick note.
Sure.
Kellerdale Garden Club is one of several garden clubs in our city. These are hardy volunteers who right now are choosing what the gardens in the spring are going to look like. And so they're ordering their seeds and planning the design of gardens at parks throughout our city. And so all of the garden clubs are part of the Edina Garden Council, and they take care of all that. So thank you so much to this. This has to do with buckthorn removal, but they do a great deal of work in our city.
Great. Thanks, Member Brindle. And their name will be posted on the website. And then we are down to correspondence petitions. I assume everything is on the dais that should be here? No, nothing new has come in that hasn't been disseminated. All right. And then the aviation noise update. Member Brindle, anything there?
Nothing really. November was the previous meeting. The next meeting is January 19th at 1:30 at MAC headquarters on 28th Avenue off of Crosstown. Arrive early because there's lots of construction at that intersection.
Okay, good. Manager Neal, any follow-on?
Just to tell you that the Noise Group is putting together their annual meeting during the National League of Cities Conference in March, and we'll give you further updates on exact time and location of that meeting as it comes together.
Great.
Good, thanks. I'm going to start mayor and council comments this evening with Member Stewart, this is his last meeting, as we mentioned earlier, and he has a PowerPoint presentation he wants to share with us. This is, I don't know if this is a group roast.
Uh-oh.
or
Hey, I'm the PowerPoint guy. What's the deal?
I'm emulating Mike Fisher. This is my wish list for the city of Edina, is what I've titled the presentation. Thank you, Jennifer. And I just wanted to take a few minutes and talk. Earlier, the mayor said some nice things about me, and it's funny. Normally, the subject of a eulogy doesn't get to hear the speech. But by the same token, they don't get to respond either. So I'm going to take a few minutes to respond. And you nice people have all put up with me for 4 years. I'm going to make you indulge me for another 10 minutes. So, and the audience is thinned out. I'm okay with it being principally all of you who are required to be here as my audience. So that's all right. Which thing do I push? This one? Nope. Uh-oh. I got it. Okay, there you go. Okay.
Oh, my.
This is a picture of me in my Edina East class of 1977 graduation gown. I love Edina. I've always loved Edina. On this particular day, I actually got to give a speech, which no one remembers. It was not memorable, but but I got to give a speech. But I've also had a life filled with service, and this is a photograph of me when I was serving in the United States Peace Corps. That's me with the Prime Minister of Fiji, Ratu Sir Kamisese Mara. You can see that a formal fashion in Fiji, the informal fashion is to wrap a sarong cloth around your waist for men and women. For the formal version of that for men, as you can see Ratu Mara wearing it's a skirt thing. You can't see the hem there, but that's what you wear. So I've had the great honor to serve on the city council with this really fine group of people, and so I just want to take a few minutes to share a few pearls of my hopes for what you will carry forward as we move on to the future. So and thanks to all of you for being such great colleagues in this endeavor. So I'll start with the good things. Keep doing the good things. Invest in infrastructure. Keep service levels high. Our police force is the best in the state. Let's keep it that way. Our fire department, EMT, fantastic. Our response rates are the best around. Public Works Department, evidenced by getting the snow removal award for the best snow removal, I think, in the nation for the last 3 or 4 years in a row. Our parks are just fantastic. Our other services, when people need things, whether it's building permits or anything else, very responsive staff up and down. Manager Neal, I trust you will tell your whole staff how appreciative I am of what great servants we have here in the city. And continue prudent fiscal decision making. We want to keep that AAA bond rating as much as possible. Continue judicious use of tools like TIF. And as much as possible, keep that tax rate line flat, which I love that graph. Let's keep it right on the same direction it's heading. Avoid pitfalls and distractions. So the first big one, do not make decisions based out of fear. And I really think it's so important. We need to avoid being emotionally wrapped up in making decisions on that basis. And it's so important to just be rational, be reasonable, and do what's right. Again, Edina Public Schools are in good shape and are under good leadership. That is not the provenance of this council. Stick to your responsibilities as city representatives, and do not allow this red herring issue that has been raised numerous times in recent months to influence decisions. Do not overuse PUD. That's one of my fears is there's no point in having zoning if it becomes a free-for-all and everything is a PUD. And it's a personal bugaboo for me. Kill off the grand rounds idea. I think cyclists don't acknowledge municipal boundaries. It doesn't make sense. It's not necessary to have rounds that stay in the Edina borders. I like the idea of connectivity, but there's no reason for it to go in a circle. Improve what you can. Implement the policies to protect our neighborhoods. I think we need a better tree policy. And we've talked about this before. I think we need better policy regarding changes to impervious versus pervious surfaces. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't at some point consider having more specific neighborhood by neighborhood zoning policies. We paint with a pretty broad brush, and not every neighborhood is the same. So it seems to me that sometimes it'd be a lot of work to do this. It'd be a big undertaking, but maybe worthwhile. And keep moving us in the direction of our stated environmental objectives. Get some green building policies. I think we talked about how organics recycling, probably next year, I think that'll be addressed. Greenhouse gas emission reduction, and consider limiting this, again, another sort of a third rail issue, but considering limiting waste haulers in the city. Maybe there's some creative ways to do that but we've kind of stubbed our toe on figuring out how to do that. And finally, continue to support affordable housing development. I'd love to find ways, I've talked about this before, ways to use the Housing Foundation to better effect, to help us, in fact, deploy some of those dollars that we collect for people who buy out of our affordable housing requirement. And refine our policies as we learn. Don't be afraid to make changes when we can make things better. And I have got the Metro Cities, the group that I will serve my final board meeting for them on Thursday. Metro Cities is, I believe, taking forward my idea to go to the state legislature and say, listen, it's not sensible for us to limit the ability to solve our affordable housing challenge by just burdening this one segment of development, and that segment being multifamily over 20 units. I think we should burden all segments of development. We should burden commercial redevelopment. We should burden a tear down of a single family residence and rebuilding a new house on the same site. If we can get a little bit of money from each of those projects, I think it'll help address the problem. So let's spread the pain out a little bit, not concentrate it on just one segment of development. Anticipate the future and act. Transportation needs will change. More people will be moving about, whether Edina itself grows or is stagnant, and congestion will continue to be an irritant. It's a fact, folks. So let's plan for it. Let's make sure we understand. Let's improve those intersections where we have problems. Let's continue to develop the Living Streets program and the Sidewalks program. These are things that will make Edina a more attractive place for future communities. More transit options will be needed. And I will say it's my personal view that rapid bus transit will suffer from the same problem that all traffic suffers from, and that uses the same highways as the rest of us. I really think rail needs to be an option. So I say to compete with other NFL cities, if the Twin Cities are really going to think of themselves in that league, we need to have a good rail system in the Twin Cities. And if we don't want to be in that league and we want to be more like Omaha, then we can take ourselves out of the running. And to be integral to the Twin Cities, Edina will need connections by rail. So again, I think that trolley car idea on the Dan Patch line is a great idea and would be beneficial in so many ways, and it would preempt some bad things that might happen there too. So I think it's worth continuing to think about that. I realize that's not something that can happen rapidly. And then avoid having the city own property that is unused. This has been a theme I think I've gone on a number of times about, but we've made a lot of really good progress. I think the Houghton Cleaners site, the Edina Realty site at 49th Street, all very important, but also, Market Street. We've had a couple other sites that we've managed to use up. The Wooddale and Valley View, we had a site down there, and there's one over on York, I think, that we got off the books. But we still have some things to do. Grandview Public Works site clearly needs to get some development. Fred Richards Park, we ought to make that fully usable amenity for the city at some point, and Weber Woods similarly. And I know we've been trying to balance the timing and the budgets and everything else to go with those things. I don't want it to get kicked down the road indefinitely. And other things. Adopt the ethics promise that we've talked about. This is one that I thought I'd be drafting before today, and I just didn't get it done. But I think it's the kind of thing that is sort of the right thing to do, so let's just get it done. We can do better on governance of our liquor enterprise. I think that when we're in a competitive industry, we need to behave like we're in a competitive industry, and this is one where even as a private citizen, I will be happy to chime in and help figure out how to get that done the right way. Invite more community participation through donations to city-sponsored projects. I think that there are some things that we can do where we can tap the benefactors in our community to help us get those things done. I think that could be a really great way to get a breakthrough on things like what to do at Grandview. And continue to fulfill Edina's commitment to be a human rights city. The fact of what we've done so far in terms of adopting recommendations from our Race and Equity Task Force are great. Let's keep it up and keep moving forward. And a reminder, we are citizens of Edina, but we're also citizens of the Twin Cities metro area. We're citizens of Minnesota. We're citizens of the United States and the world. And we are merely stewards here. We are trying to create a great place for our children and grandchildren and do our part to pass along to them a place that's better and also not pass along to them debt and all kinds of other things that they want. So let's not let them down. And finally, thank you to everybody. You guys have been great. And so, one other thing that I've been known to do is I scratch out some poetry from time to time. And it's really bad poetry, so I'm going to make you suffer and listen to some of that. This is my ode to Edina. There we are. It has been my honor for these last 4 years to work for Edina, a city rich in both tax base and volunteers. My gratitude goes out to the city's remarkable staff, whose effort makes our city better by half. And its leadership is first rate. They're the real deal, dedicated servants like Lisa Schaefer and Scott Neal. We've got the best city services, snow plowing, fire, and police force, and amazing parks and amenities like our new Braemar Golf Course. For better council colleagues, one couldn't possibly wish, including the brilliant newest guy, Michael Fish. And she who my wry comments she occasionally shush was Mary Brindle, whose wise words never come in a rush. And Mr. Staunton dials up selfless service to an 11. I'll be forever grateful for all I've learned from my friend Kevin. And I'd be remiss not to mention my dear mentor Ann Swenson, whose guidance and wisdom makes me a tremendous fan. And we're blessed by Jim Hovland and Lorraine, his sweet wife. Many feel like I do, happy if he's mayor for life. Finally, the one who's seen me wrestle with tough issues and strife, but supports me through it all, my best friend Sheila, my wife. And so in life, there are few things finer than being able to serve this great city, Edina.
All right, that's I think before we finish our council comments, let's all walk down in front, and we're going to give this to Bob. Staff, too, let's all go down there and join Bob.
You are going smack in the middle.
Snuggle up, people, snuggle up.
Good?
Well, let's just take a couple more. Thank you.
Taking more is going to change. The subjects. The subject matter is still to be asked. Just that.
Well, Mary, you can go next while the rest of us try to figure out a quick rap or a poem or something.
All right. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
The fun is not over. Because you're not going anywhere, and neither am I, so we'll stay in touch. All right, couple things from me. Today we received an email from Jane McCrary about the double entrance ramp onto South Highway 100 from Eden Avenue. And one comes from 50th, one comes from Eden. And the one from Eden has the yield sign. And she was coming from the 50th Street entrance ramp, and a car that should have yielded did not. And she sent an impassioned email about the fact that her 8-month-old was in the car with her. I forwarded that email on to Scott McBride at MnDOT, and he shared it with April Crockett at MnDOT as well. So it'd be nice to have some sort of safety resolution on that entrance ramp. People have various names for that entrance ramp, and none of them are good. It's actually a very dangerous situation, because when you're coming down that entrance ramp from the Eden Avenue exit or entrance onto 100, the visibility is terrible. And while you are turned, anything can happen in front of you, and you think the car is going to move in front of you, and then it doesn't, while you are looking back. And so it really is a situation that that ought to be dealt with. So hopefully we can get a light shined on that. So I did respond to her, told her what I had done, encouraged her to communicate on her own with Mr. McBride, and so I trust that that conversation will go somewhere. The other night, let's see, I left on the 12th. So this would have been December 11th. I attended a meeting at a neighborhood gathering at a home on Terra Road to discuss the 70th and Cahill small area plan process and draft. Councilmember-elect Ron Anderson was in attendance as well. And so 3 members of the 70th and Cahill Small Area Planning Committee were there, and it was a healthy, hearty, robust conversation. It was good, and I listened, and then imparted a few things to make sure that people would not go down a circuitous path of fear and misunderstandings. And so I hope I was able to help people understand some of the realities of where we're going, and that in some cases we're not sure where we're going with it yet either. So tried to be open and honest with them, received some nice thank yous from the residents who were there. So I think my attendance and comments were appreciated. In the paper today, Metro Athlete of the Year, Megan Phillip, who is a junior at Edina High School. She's girls swimming and diving. She's making some amazing inroads for herself as a young person already. So congratulations to her. That's a huge accomplishment. I think there's some, according to the article, she will be feted more completely in June at the end of the school year when something else takes place for all these excellent athletes. And then saw an email, and I want to reach out to our public works staff and our park staff for clearing of pathways in our parks. I received a call about a week ago from a gentleman. The path around Pamela Park gets plowed, but there's a connection to that from, and I'm not going to remember the street, but from a street that wasn't getting plowed. So I sent a quick email, and somebody was out there and plowed it like minutes later. So thank you. And then the note that arrived today was a thank you for clearing the snow at Bredesen Park. So people are definitely using our trails, and it's really nice to have that be recognized. Finally, just a huge, hearty, happy holidays to everyone. Safe holiday season. We get back here after the new year, so have fun with family and friends, and I wish everyone well.
Thanks, Mary. Member Staunton.
I can't top the poem, that's for sure. But I wanted to just share a minute of my gratitude. Bob, you and I started together, and so I feel like we've been occupying the same space for 4 years, and it's been my privilege to get to know you better and watch you work. And folks who watched what Bob just did, or have watched him, you know, this is really who he is. He is the most straightforward, what you see is what you get, earnest person that I know. And we have benefited so much from that. And in a time when people are so cynical about public service, you have given in a way that is so authentic and so genuine to try to do the right thing at every single turn. And I just wanted to identify 3 things you said in your remarks that are lessons that I'll take away. And one was, don't act out of fear. You've said that before, and it's great advice. Too often we spend more time worrying about what will happen than aspiring to make good things happen. And so thank you for that advice. You mentioned and you showed a picture that showed your lifelong devotion to the fact that we're part of a bigger world. We have a great community, but we have an obligation to the rest of the world that we're part of, and we need to act on that every day. And finally, just do the right thing. And that's great advice. So thank you for your service over the last 4 years. Thank you for being my friend, and we will miss you.
Thank you. Member Fisher.
I can never say it like that. It's just amazing. I can never say it like that.
So
That was great.
So I wore a green tie and socks in honor of Mr. Edina. And, you know, I knew he was going to wear a green tie tonight. You know, Bob's graduating class must have been the biggest in Edina's history. Because surely, every presentation that's made here, he says, you know, he was my classmate. Or, you know, his brother's sister-in-law was my classmate. You had a lot of classmates. And the reality is, if Bob doesn't know you, he knows at least one of your relatives, right? I mean, this is a fact. Kevin just made a comment and I always try to find the words to describe Bob, because Bob, you're so unique in such a good way. And you used two words that really nailed it, earnest and authentic. So I'm not as eloquent as Kevin. So there was a point where I was talking to Bob and I was trying to express things like earnestness and authenticity. And I said, Bob, you're such a Boy Scout. And his response was, actually, I was an Eagle Scout. and I was not surprised. I was like, of course you were, Bob. Of course you were. Bob is also just such a good person. And I think we all have seen that in so much of what he does, but it's the little things too. You know, getting the emails from Bob letting us know whose birthday it is.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, or when it's actually your birthday and it's a council meeting, there's a cupcake sitting here for that person. Always thinking about others. And I've really appreciated that. Importantly for our discussion tonight, he's just been a heck of a good council member. Now, Bob and I approach things from different angles. Bob has a really keen business mind, and he's pretty good with numbers. I'm a designer, and I'm good with pictures. He sits on the left, I sit on the right. Or vice versa, depending on where you're looking from, right? He's a poet, I am Noet. I just came up with that today.
I can tell.
That
would have been worthy of one of my
I threw it in.
poems,
It was a
actually.
last second change, you know. We've certainly not agreed on everything. We take, different viewpoints. But I always learn something from you. Always. And I love sitting here looking across when you're talking about things, and you make me think about them in a different way. And that's been really valuable. I've learned other things from Bob. I've learned how to put the curse of a billy goat on people. I learned how not to get into a kayak when touring Minnehaha Creek. Sorry for all of you that weren't there, but it's. Let's just say he didn't.
I got wet.
He didn't apply his Boy Scout training at that moment.
When I was a Boy Scout, my backside wasn't as big as it is today.
But most importantly, Bob, I think what I've learned from you is how to try to turn the other cheek when people are saying things that are unfair and untrue about you. I watched that happen, and it's truly amazing. I really mean that, and it means a lot, and I try to learn from that. So, based on what we talked about tonight, the pork chop, I just think that we need to name that Stewart Island. If nothing else, it'll be a constant reminder of Bob's wish to get rid of the dang thing, right? So Bob, I may have lost you as a fellow council member, but I really believe that I have you as a lifelong friend, and that means the world to me. So thank you.
Great comments from folks. About a guy that we got a chance to talk about earlier with a bunch of folks gathered early before the council meeting. As fine and genuine a person as you'll ever find anywhere is Bob Stewart. Not to be outdone by Bob, I did, as you guys were talking, scrawl out a little poem.
Really? Limerick.
It should be said as Bob Stewart exits the City Hall door that we served with a man who is good to the core. His smile, his caring are second to none. His only weak point is an occasional bad pun. He means much to us, this guy who has long loved his town. We'll strive to do what he says, to not let him down. His laugh will linger, his persona survives for all of us the rest of our lives.
Aww.
Here, here.
Thank you, Bob.
Well done. Impressive.
Thanks for that little bit of time. And I'm going to skip all this other stuff, but I just wanted the folks to know, and you maybe all do, that our friend Jim Nelson is recovering from open heart surgery. So he's down at Abbott and doing well. Good. And got a report from Jack Rice 2 days in a row.
Okay.
Jack went down to see him today.
Okay.
So he's working his way back.
Well, I hope it does his heart good to see how well the Southdale area plan was received.
So that's it for us. We're signing off December 18th. Bob, thank you so much. We stand adjourned.